No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. And today I'm happy to be back in here at 11:54 a.m. with my man Abba.
Yes. Supposed to be here for 11:45.
Yeah, no, we're supposed to do 11:30, I believe. But the entire highway is shut down right now. It's actually kind of apocalyptic state of affairs in Los Angeles right now, man.
Yeah. I've heard basically yesterday was a crazy car chase of sorts. Everybody's watching it on television. You saw,
I didn't
you guys
even
watch
see
it?
that.
You guys didn't see the car chase yesterday? Okay,
Damn,
yeah, you did,
you're
right?
not even from this country and you're more tapped in than us.
I mean, it was just all over the news. It was everywhere. This guy went through like 3 different cars, broke into a couple of cars.
Oh, actually, I did see this on Instagram a little bit. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So it was like GTA in real life. And then today, apparently, it was a shooting. Basically,
Right.
like they're having a standoff, and that's why the highway.
Which to me, even though the house where the cops are having this standoff with this guy, it's like, why does that mean that the highway, which is like, pretty significantly far away from this standoff, why does the entire highway need to be blocked off? This is causing like 3+ hours of absolute mayhem in Los Angeles right now for one guy shooting at a cop, which I acknowledge is a big deal, but I'm just like, why does that then mean this? I don't know. There's probably a good reason.
Probably a chain reaction of sorts.
But it's just funny because, like, I feel like the narrative about America and Los Angeles right now is very much that we are fucked, that the crime is insane. I'm not sure how much that gets talked about in Canada, but you come out here and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, it really is GTA.
I mean, everything. I used to live here. This is in 2012. I lived here for 2 years. I lived in North Hollywood.
Right.
I feel like it's changed drastically even from then.
In what way?
I mean, I used to take public transport, so I used to see how fucking crazy like the city was for a lot of the poor people, and then obviously for the homeless folks. And then I took it recently, and I'm like, I barely recognize like that shit is like dead ass dangerous. Like I still take the line to Long Beach. That's a crazy fucking line, bro.
That is true. I've done that quite a few times
so
in my
much
life.
like mental health issues, and we scoff and we laughing at it, but like it's actually super sad to see it unfold. Like these people like live on some of these trains. You see them day, and like they're going through episodes all the time.
It's just wild because the subway in New York City is for everyone.
Yeah.
You'll see some guy who makes $1 million a year on there. It's no big deal. You see, young kids. You see homeless people. But for the most part, it's like a pretty upscale environment. It's a decent club. Whereas in LA, the vibe or the image of taking the train is so dramatically different. San Francisco, you take the BART.
Yeah.
Nobody's looking down on you for taking the BART.
No.
Out here, if you told me you took the train here, I would be like, damn.
Yeah.
Times must be tough.
Yeah, you don't value your life.
I'm sorry. That's just how it comes off to me.
You know what it is? In New York, taking the train's efficient.
Yeah.
The reason why people take it's not because they
That's a
love
good
the
point.
train. It's like you live in Manhattan, driving anywhere is pretty much impossible. So you might as well just take the train to get there because it's always faster.
And if you took the train to get here, you would probably then have to hop on a bus
The buses don't work.
or like something. Like it's not like convenient enough. Whereas like public transportation in tightly condensed cities is amazing.
Absolutely.
Whereas here, it just doesn't really work out so well.
Yeah. And people don't care because they're so used to driving, but I think it really impacts the feel of a city.
Right.
Because what ends up happening is that everything becomes so segregated to certain areas, and especially if you're poor, you don't have access to vehicles, or if traffic's really bad, then you just don't leave your spot.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's why folks living in a certain part of LA will never. I remember I was living in NoHo and I was dating a girl in Santa Monica for a year, and like that shit was hell. Because like certain times of the day, don't even bother trying to drive because you're driving an hour and a half minimum.
100%.
Right. And so when you see that, like it definitely keeps people in their areas a lot more and makes the city, I feel like, a little bit less vibrant.
Right. And when I go out to New York or when I'm in, Toronto or Tokyo or whatever, I just love the walkable city vibe where it's like you leave your hotel or your apartment or whatever and you walk a mile to a nice restaurant and then you go for a nice little walk after that. But it's very walkable. Like everything's tightly condensed, and it's just, I love that vibe, and I hate that LA doesn't really encompass that because you can have that downtown, but it's just, downtown is too fucking crazy, and everybody with like almost any degree of success just ends up moving up to the valley where you're kind of isolated. You have nothing to do with your community. You don't really interact with people, and I miss New York so much because of that specific thing, but then there's just so many other factors that make living out here just way more irresistible to me.
Okay, we can get to that right afterwards, but I was going to sound the topic of walkability. It's like,
And I like that we're going with city planning as the theme in this.
hey, man, listen,
No, I like it.
that's real because it ties into some other stuff. But, like, city planning is not just city planning. Like,
Right.
when you have a walkable city, it makes the population much healthier, right? Because people don't recognize it. Just having to walk to places,
Right.
you're burning calories, right? You're taking care of your health in a lot of ways. That's why you go to a lot of European cities where cars are not nearly as common. You see health is far more prominent because people take bikes to work, they walk to work, they walk to their bakery, they walk to spots. Whereas here, like, I remember I was living in NoHo, like, I had to either walk 45 minutes to get to a grocery store or I had to drive in a car. No, it was we walking 45 minutes one way and 45 back just to pick up groceries. You feel me? But the difference is when you're there, you're walking up a bit of hills, or in Europe, like then you grab your stuff, you come home. So there's all these things that start to compound in terms of like how it really impacts people's lives.
Yeah, my girl was just in France and Sicily and Italy and everything for like 3 weeks with the kid, traveling around, looking at wedding venues and just sightseeing and everything. And she's talking about how she's just eating pastries and all these crazy snacks the whole time. But then she's also just walking hours and hours a day. She came back, weighed herself after 3 weeks and did not gain a pound. And she was just like astonished because she's eaten every pastry, every cookie, whatever the fuck that she wants. And she just couldn't believe it. But like I very easily in my day-to-day life can get zero cardio. Like I will walk way less than a mile in a given day, which is very easy. But back when I lived in New York, that was not an option. That was never going to happen.
And I think that contributes to your overall health because everyone thinks of like health always being like related to exercise.
Right.
But there's plenty of people all over the world who don't gain massive amounts of weight who are able to get their daily exercises just from just menial labor that they do.
I remember I had a homie in high school who goes to college and he just comes back from, you know, Christmas break or whatever, and he had just lost like 20 pounds, 30 pounds. I'm like, what the fuck happened? He's like, I'm eating exactly the same, but because of the college, the way it's set up, I kind of got to walk like, you know, half a mile or a mile in between classes. Yeah. So he's not even intending to get any exercise and he's just melting fat off because his lifestyle just allowed for it. And that's something that like I love the actually going on my way to exercise, but I also kind of like have to do that in a way that I wouldn't have to if I lived in a nice little walkable city.
Yeah. And, you know, topic of like fat phobia and like personal accountability is something that's come up a lot the last couple of weeks. You know, you had like food experts saying you could eat whatever you want and, you know, don't feel shame. There's no such thing as bad foods or good foods or whatever. And I'm like, yo, this shit's crazy. And, you know, even though we talk about personal accountability, like choosing better in regards to what you eat and getting to the gym, all that shit, a lot of it also is social engineered. Like if you live in a society that's more geared towards healthy options, you're going to have healthier general outcomes. And so when I love coming to America. I love coming to visit here. I think there's so many upsides to it. But then whenever I think about like raising a family or having kids and things like that, I become a bit more hesitant because I just feel like the way that society's engineered oftentimes, it's not conducive towards that. You know what I mean? When I think about raising kids, I want them to... Here's something that's true about LA. I don't know if you agree. I feel like LA is one of the most like segregated cities in a weird way.
Very. Because you don't have to touch ground with the other people at all. Like somebody who lives in Beverly Hills never has to go anywhere near Compton.
Right.
They probably don't even have to like see the sign for Compton on the highway because they're so in their own fucking world. Whereas that's one thing I love about New York too, is that you got black neighborhood, Hasidic Jewish neighborhood, Mexican fucking neighborhood, white gentrified areas. It's very much more a melting pot. And then all these people have to get on the train together and they have to deal with each other. And it's harder for you to hate the Jewish guy with the funny little hat when you're fucking standing next to him on the train and constantly being reminded that this guy's just like me. We're all in the same struggle here together.
Yeah, I don't know how much it does for hate specifically, but I do know it just changes your perception of like race itself. And so one thing that's like changed over the years in America is like, oddly enough, even though we made so much progress, actually segregation in terms of like where people live by race has actually increased. So people are more segregated today than they were maybe like 10, 15 years ago, which whenever I read that, I was like, that's crazy to think about. But when I think about city planning, when I think about the ways in which people are segregated, when I think about how unwalkable these places are, how lack of public transport exists, I just think like when I think about having kids, it's not necessarily the most prime spot for me. Then you have the whole safety issue as well. But
yeah, well, because it's such a different set of requirements. Because when I was just in Brooklyn, you know, there were moments where I would see like a little class going from, I don't know, like the park or whatever to back to the class. And it's like they have like a rope and all the little kids have to hold on to the rope and the teachers kind of surround them. And it's only like 12 or 15 kids or whatever, but they're all walking in a super orderly fashion. And I 100% get it because it's like these fucking kids are having to walk by 8 BMX dudes sitting on their bikes outside a corner store. Half of them are smoking cigarettes and weed and drinking at noon. And it's like, this is just such a and I immediately just start to view myself so differently once I like am thinking about the perspective of these teachers and these kids. Yeah. And I'm like, I am sitting here smoking a spliff at noon. And, you know, it's like that, choosing to be a parent in that environment just requires kind of a leap of faith and just a dedication to trying to, like, you know, think about how concerned you would be about the school that your kid was going to when you're in that kind of environment, as opposed to here where the school might be behind giant fucking fences. It's on a state and shit.
Yo, you see like barbed wire fences on a bunch of the schools. Like in my area, like bunch of barbed wire fence on top of it. And these are high fences too. It's not 10 feet, like 15 feet. I'm like, what are you trying to keep them away from? Like, who would you think, Godzilla gonna come through this bitch? But they set up their security system understanding the threat that exists. And so I understand why it's in place. I didn't grow up in that environment. You know what I'm saying? Like, even when I lived in Ethiopia, it wasn't that extreme level of security. And so I understand the threat here is different. I just don't want necessarily my kids to have to deal with all that.
Yeah, I mean, but it's such a balance, because on one hand, I would kind of like to raise my kids in the fucking woods, often, you know, a much more rural area, and be able to have them be able to play outside like it's nothing, whatever. The American dream or the California dream is to be able to have the best of both worlds, where you're kind of like near a city, but also have access to nature and everything. So, you know, Joe Rogan left us, but like I remember always hearing him talk about that, where it's like he's a 45-minute drive from Hollywood, but then he also has all this land he can run and swim and do whatever. You're right by the beach, you know.
But that's only accessible to the ultra rich.
Exactly, yeah.
You know?
That's why we all have to become ultra rich YouTubers.
Yeah. That's only accessible to the ultra rich. And I think one of the big differences when you go to these other countries, or once you was spending time in Europe, like, you have access to that. If you want to go spend time in nature, you're like a train ride away if you really want to go. And then at the same time, if you want to be able to have access to the city streets, or if your kids want to roam, like, that's not an issue. You know, like, I like the fact that they have that balance, not just for the rich people, but also the regular folks as well.
But that's what's interesting about Americans is that, and probably Canadians as well, is that people are bringing themselves together into big urban environments. You know, people want to live in New York and LA and Austin much more than they want to live in suburban areas. And that's, you know, the internet's fault. That's a lot of different things' fault, that people are just seeing these vibrant cultures. They want to be part of it. But then at the same time, another big trend is people just massively complaining about like homelessness and you know, crime and a lot of things that we can talk about how they need to be reined in, but at the same time, I mean, these are kind of just parts of the urban experience. It's like when I lived in New York for all those years, by no means did I think that I had the right to complain about homeless people being out on the street. That's just part of living in New York, you know?
Yeah, I think the homelessness here is particularly special. I've definitely seen homelessness in every country, even in Ethiopia when I was living there. Like, I've seen a lot of homelessness, but LA homelessness is different. Even it's different from New York homelessness. Like, here, they're like aggressively in your face, and they don't even want money sometimes. They just get in your face.
Well, there's no comparison for New York, where in LA we have Skid Row. 30,000, I think, people basically created this fucking whole society of tents and shit that they could just live within. And there is some sick, depraved shit going on in there. There are children living in there.
Oh, yeah.
There's God knows what going on in there. And New York doesn't really have an equivalent of that. They're way harder on the homeless, and it's a much more accommodating place to live in LA.
I realized it was weird when I was dating a girl and she said she wanted to go visit Skid Row. I was like, why? It's like, I just want to see what it's like in there. I was like, do you think this is some random tourist attraction for you to like visit? But people take an interest. It's become like part of the things that folks want to see when they come to city. I want to see the depravity. It is actually super dark. I actually walked through there one time at night by accident when I was coming back. I was coming back from one of the shopping areas downtown, and then I was walking, and it started to really sink in how different it was when you see everything is boarded up, everything is kind of closed down, and you start walking a little bit, you're like, oh shit, and then you start seeing the tents. And for me, on the outside looking in, especially with the homelessness over here, why does it feel different? I think it feels different for me when I watch it, just because not only the abundance of it, not only does it feel extra ignored, but it's strange how I'm used to panhandlers. I'm used to folks that have mental health issues, but generally are looking for something. Here, it doesn't seem like that's always the case. Here, it doesn't even, like, you know, sometimes you'll hand people money, they'll say, thank you. Here, man, you might get the opposite reaction. They might fight you right afterwards. Like, they're really going through some stuff, and they've been going through for some time. And so it feels distinctly different from any place I've ever been to. And not even just the density of, like, Skid Row. I'm just talking about even individuals. Like, when I'm taking the train to Santa Monica or whatever, they're doing something different. You know what I mean? They're not asking for stuff in the same way.
Yeah, I don't think that in America I've seen anything close to it. Maybe when you talk about San Francisco or Portland, I've heard that those places are pretty gnarly at this point in time. But yeah, it's definitely kind of a uniquely West Coast thing where that's just sort of where they get guided. And a lot of people just end up in this lifelong cycle of drug abuse and just, you know, mental illness. And it's tough because I think it's the one thing that, if people are honest with themselves, that both parties clearly do not have an answer for, that is just too gigantic of an undertaking, and society is not willing to stomach the absolutely insane amount of money that it would take to just build housing for every fucking homeless person. And people also just don't like the incentives of the idea of like, oh, you can not do shit and then we'll just take care of you, and it's I don't know, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain degree of homelessness that's kind of due to personal choices and stuff like. But then some of it is just financial. Like I know friends who go in and out of homelessness.
Really?
Yeah, I'm sure you know people. Like when you're on the come up, there's people who have a place and then they don't. And then you have to imagine. You just takes a couple of wrong decisions at that point for you to really get into the streets and then stay there in permanence, right?
Right, but that's the thing, is that almost everybody I can think of, even the worst drug addicts and the people who had the hardest time going on, they always seem like they had a friend group that they could fall back on, that they could find a girl who would take care of them, that their parents would take care of them. I don't know that I've ever really known anybody in my life who was like anything close to a friend that really became full-blown homeless drug addict living on the streets, because they all had some degree of safety net that could kind of, save them at some point. And that is the scary thing that most of us never have to contemplate, is like, there's a bunch of shit that can go wrong in your life, and a bunch of those things have happened to us, but we've all been able to make it work in one way or another. And a lot of people, if you imagine all your family members dying, if you imagine your financial situation just being much worse than it is, then like, yeah, it really could happen to anybody.
Yeah, that's a frightening thing to imagine. And I think it definitely tracks pretty well, but generally when things get more expensive, you know what I'm saying, when times get more difficult in terms of finance, in terms of like the world economy, you definitely see homelessness spike completely. Now, there's plenty of people who recover from that and then find a place and find a job, but the ones who end up getting into drugs and then go deeper and deeper into that hole, that's generally where it starts. And then, I think that's a pretty straight line. I think you can find, as Los Angeles has gotten more expensive and things have gotten hard over here, the homeless problem has definitely spiked. And it's hard to fix because it's not something you can just throw money at, because the society that kind of fermented or fomented this issue itself still exists. And so there's going to be a new batch of people who will take those places.
Because during COVID, it was like certain areas of the valley, like parking lots that you're just used to seeing, a handful of cars parked in, and then all of a sudden they just become overrun with homeless people. And I'm driving by it every day and just thinking like, these are mostly people. Some of them were probably already homeless and they relocated, but these are mostly people who became homeless as a result of the pandemic and shit. Like, these are people who probably had some sort of normal life going on, and these circumstances that I'm oblivious to just fucking put them living in this parking lot. And that's a fucking scary ass thing to just kind of witness that happen to people.
Yeah. If you watch like a lot of interviews with homeless folks, there's like people
on
who
Software
do like,
Underbelly, yeah.
Okay. People do like street interviews with them, and you ask them, like, they talk to them about their stories, and you find like, yeah, I had a business and then it failed, and I just felt so ashamed, and my wife was unhappy, and then I couldn't pay anything, and then she left me. And like, you'll hear stories like that. You hear people like, I was at a party with conference, and then started taking drugs and got deeper, and then lost my job, and then kept taking the drugs. Like it tracks, like, not always with economy, with like just generally drugs at the basis of it, but also for a lot of people it is money. And so when I look at the pandemic, for example, people see like a rise in crime. Well, where did that come from? Well, things got harder for most people financially. At the same time, rent, housing prices, everything exponentially rose. And
people got a taste of having some disposable income with all the money that they were giving away, which I think really warped a lot of people's brains as to what to expect out of life.
Fair. Yeah, you got everything cross-section. But, like, yeah, during the last 2.5 years, crime jumped. Like, I think it's like 75%. Yeah. And I don't know if you felt it out here.
Well, when you see these statistics, and you'll see a lot of, like, people on Twitter trying to argue that, well, actually, crime hasn't gone up that much. And it's like, motherfucker, do you know how few crimes are reported? Like, a big part of the fact that of crime in LA. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm lucky it's only happened to me one time, but there was kind of like this babbling homeless person that was kind of like outside my apartment, sort of saying some weird shit to my girl. Yeah. Kind of a scary situation, because it's like, if I wasn't in the house, then who knows what could have happened. He could have tried to follow her into the house, whatever. But we're lucky to have a gate outside our house and everything. But yeah, like, she asked me to call the cops. I call the cops. They put me on hold for like 15 minutes. There's no chance. I'm like, there's nobody that I don't have a conversation with. And by this point, he's gone. And I'm just thinking, like, what the fuck am I going to do? Like, this is stupid as fuck.
Yeah.
But there's an example of a crime or a sticky situation that would have been counted towards crime statistics, but they never even got a chance to find out that there was something going on because, I mean.
All my friends told me in the last like 4 years, they all had their cars broken into at one point or another.
Right.
That became like super common for folks to have to deal with.
Yeah, and if you talk to people up in San Francisco where the bippin epidemic is so big, it's fucking insane. Bippin is like, I think you take a car antenna or is it a spark plug or they have something that just like breaks the window super easily.
Okay.
And so they can just do it insanely fast, just like take all your shit out the back of the car. They have videos of people doing it in traffic where the car will stop at a red light and they just walk up, boom, grab the camera equipment out the back.
That's crazy.
Fucking gnarly, dude.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But you have to imagine a lot of this, like I said, if it tracks with the economy and things getting financially harder, it's like it's not a sexy thing to talk about just because when you think of the economy, everyone's like, that's too nebulous, it's too big. And so I understand it, but it always tracks with that. And I think as things get more difficult, it tracks across dating, it tracks across like job opportunities, crime. Like when things get financially more difficult, right? All of a sudden you move back in with your parents. I mean, listen, trying to date when you live with your parents, that shit ain't the same no more. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But how you going to afford a place to stay when like your rent has gone up exponentially, right? Like I know friends who like their rent jumped up 800 in the last 2 years. I'm like, bro, that's a hard thing to stomach when you've just been living paycheck to paycheck, right?
Yeah.
And so that affects folks. You don't have as much disposable income. You have to take up extra hours. You can't have as much time, or maybe you're just feeling financially priced out, a bit of ashamed of the fact that you ain't got your finances like as a man. How you going to be able to date properly?
Right.
And so like all of these things compound into like making society overall worse for people. Now you and I are pretty insulated from it because we have that financial flexibility. If anything, we strive.
But when you said the rent going up by 800, I was just like putting myself in the mental state that I was at 10 years ago where that would have been impossible for me to even comprehend.
Yeah. I mean, that's me being generous. I know people who were dealt with way more than 800 because in some places where there's no rent control, like the landlord can do whatever the fuck they want, especially if they know other tenants are going to scoop that bitch up. And so that's those issues that you have in place.
You know what's funny is there was a clip of us talking, and I don't think that either of us were tagged in the clip, but I saw it go viral on Twitter and get like 1 million views. And it was us having that conversation about how even though we've done well for ourselves, that it's, erroneous for us to like ascribe all of the success to ourselves. And then in reality, there's so many elements of privilege that we've all, been impacted by and everything like that. And I like go back and watch it, and it really was pretty fucking profound. Like it was very, very well said in terms of just acknowledging your own success and also pointing out the fact that one does not become successful without many circumstances going correct for them, which are out of their control.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually kind of beautiful. I think some people find that it's kind of lame or there's like a lack of self-determination there. In the American mindset, everything's like work hard, hustle, and then you'll get there, right? Which I like a lot. I think it empowers people, and you want that kind of messaging. Even politically, I don't like it when everything's like, well, systemically, and it's like, all right, we get it. We know this person, right? But on the other hand, if you don't acknowledge all the elements around you that help kind of push you forward, I think you're doing a big disservice when you're telling other people how to push forward because they may not be coming from the same starting point. It's not enough to just push them down that road.
Right.
And so me having a mentor at some point helps a lot.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Me having a good family base, which can tell me like this is wrong and they were present and they were there to be supportive, that helps a lot. And so knowing all those different elements I think is important because not only are you able to be better grateful, but if you're giving people game, then you can be more realistic about the game you're giving.
Right. I think it's kind of interesting seeing what people are into because it feels like a lot of the manosphere type people don't really bother to ever have any kind of thoughtful perspective on that. The attitude is much more like, I'm dope. I did this. It's all hard work. You can do it too. Caught my course. It's just like somehow that opinion appeals to a very different segment of society. Because I did see that clip go viral on Twitter, so I can't like deny that it had an audience who appreciated that sentiment. Yeah. But it feels like the audience for the other sentiment of you can do it too. All you have to do is work hard. That audience is bigger.
Yeah, I mean, it's empowering. If I'm an individual and I'm watching a clip, I don't really want to care about what's happening societally or, like systemically or whatever, because I can't change that. Right. So if you tell me I'm the solution and I can do everything to change my life and I control everything and I can fix this, that's great. And I don't disagree that I think that's if I'm an individual looking at a problem, that's how I want to think about it. But this is where it comes back to like even the whole fat phobia thing and like society engineering itself. I'm like, yes, you can encourage people to go to the gym and eat well, and you can do that, but you can also set things up business wise, society wise, to make it more efficient for people. Don't make it so that a gym is 1 hour away. Don't make it so that the grocery stores are 45-minute drive away. Don't make it so that the way we plan the city means that you gotta drive everywhere and you can't have natural. There's ways in which we can get better outcomes for society without putting everything always on the individual. That's why I'm thinking about better outcomes.
Capitalism is supposed to account for that, because the grocery store is supposed to want to be near the customers, and they should, if they are a profit-seeking firm, that they should have no reason not to want to go be near the paying customers, right? Because that's what people always try to make the argument too of like, oh, the hood is full of liquor stores, and it's like, well, the liquor stores are only going to operate wherever they feel that they could be profitable, right?
Sure.
It's not like a pestilence that's being forced upon you. It's just the fact that people are actually buying it, which obviously like feeds back into like it being readily available, so more people are likely to drink and stuff. But there's plenty of places to get alcohol near my house. I might have to go to the grocery store instead of the liquor store, but it's still right there, you know?
Absolutely. But I think you can't discount the whole concept of convenience. Whilst the fast food joints are competing with like the restaurant, like the grocery stores, for example, the profit margins for the grocery store are probably not nearly as high as a fast food joint. So they probably have more income, more money to work with, much better zoning in that regards. And so for them, it's much easier for them to maximize their profits, right? So when you're looking at this stuff, I don't disagree that the reason why the liquor stores go there is because they have that option. I just think that that's where society comes in. Because even though you want to think of capitalism as this great thing that just makes everything work, we have regulations in place because we recognize the ways in which capitalism can be bad,
right?
Or it can be going too far in towards of like being hyper predatory on the consumer.
And when I think about regulations when it comes to food, I think that's such an interesting idea, because at one point in Manhattan, or maybe it was Times Square, I forget, but they banned like soft drinks over a certain size, and that's a cliche like American thing, is that people come from other countries and they're like, holy fuck, how is your large soda is this big, where in London it might be this big, and it's like pretty understandable. But then there does feel like there's something kind of distinctly un-American about outlawing people being able to sell a certain size beverage, even though the outcome of that inevitably is going to be like less people in the hospital, less obesity, less diabetes, etc. But I mean, I don't know. Sometimes it just doesn't really 100% sit right with me. Same thing with cigarettes.
Yeah. But that's why you make adjustments. There was a time and place where you guys paid your tributes to the monarchy, and you guys said, "Fuck that. We're going to change the way America's run, and now we're going to run it this way." Things can evolve and adapt, right? If you're realizing this is getting constant bad outcomes, you change things. For example, tobacco products before were at a certain price. Now they tax the fuck out of it. So you get a $20 tobacco, like cigarettes, for example, like $10 to $15 of it goes to the government at certain points, just to make it less profitable and less present. I think I'm fine with society making certain decisions if it comes to a better outcome for society, but we always want to measure that between people's choice, personal freedoms. But when it comes to stuff like food, I don't mind if people want to be able to choose the worst foods in the world. It's different when the worst foods are like, the way that they're set up is like to be super addictive.
Yeah.
Like they literally change your brain chemistry when it comes to like sugars and stuff like that. And so if it's leading to people dying like crazy, if you're getting a population that can't work because they're too obese and all this stuff, you want to encourage the personal accountability. But I'm not mad at the government coming and saying like, listen, people aren't making these choices, so why don't we just cut this shit out as an option for them, because we're losing people in the workforce, we're losing people in their communities. And I get the whole personal accountability thing and the personal choice, but I remember when the pandemic hit, like, Black people especially were affected by COVID just because obesity and pre-existing conditions were really present there.
Right.
High blood pressure, the foods that we eat.
Less available,
and so that's why
available
people
testing.
Why Black people were overrepresented when it came to dying from COVID.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because they had those problems. And so part of me thinks like, damn, you lose so many people already to crime and all this other stuff. Now losing folks to things that are preventable with better choices. You know what I'm saying? I just wish that wasn't the case.
But what if I want to start a restaurant and I want to serve the least healthy food that you could ever conceive of? I want to have triple fried chicken with the mac and cheese with acidic death sauce on it. I want the average meal to be like 6,000 calories. And it's just like the worst place on earth. But do you really feel like the government should be able to tell me that I can't open that restaurant? Within reason, there are some things that they should be able to tell me, but I just feel like me serving unhealthy food should not be something that they have a say in.
Okay, so there's a balance, right? if you want to do that and you're a one-off, that's one thing.
Right, because then once it becomes systematic, this is the,
because even you're going to start to feel it when your neighbors are dying, when people you know are dying from the foods that maybe you didn't serve, but some dude across the street, you're going to feel differently about that whole idea, right? Most folks start to change the way they see drugs and anything like that once it affects their communities. I think people are going to feel the same way about these foods as they become much more of a problem.
I was thinking that the other day. I was watching a documentary about the Bang Energy CEO.
Yeah.
A little YouTube documentary about him. And I mean, I don't know if I could live with myself if I woke up every day and that's what I had to fucking do to the world, was just like push this absolutely toxic, terrible concoction. I feel I have a completely clean conscience about having conversations on camera. You know, like what we have done over the last half hour or whatever is totally fine by me. I don't feel like we've brought any negativity into the world. I think it's all good. I have no qualms with this. Yeah. But if I was having to convince people to buy super creatine Bang Energy every day, I don't know. Maybe I could do it to the point where I made a bunch of money, but I think I would just be looking for an off-ramp as soon as I started to really see success. If my day-to-day routine was that mundane or not even mundane, I'm sure it's exciting, but it's just so stupid and senseless. There's no purpose to it.
I actually don't know what's so bad about Bang. I don't even know what the brand is.
I mean, I'm probably being dishonest by acting like it's that much worse than any other energy drink, you know, but it's probably the most extreme energy drink that you could buy in terms of caffeine and everything else that's in it. And they're dealing with massive lawsuits because they basically were lying to the American people, saying that, or the world saying that there was super creatine in it, which it ended up being that there was no creatine in it. So they got like a $700 million judgment or something. It's a gnarly story. If you want to look up this YouTube video, I'm sure pop right up on YouTube. But
yeah, I just to come back to the original point, I think the way that we're set up a lot of times in North America in general is not efficient towards good outcomes for regular folks.
Right.
And so I look at other places in their lifestyle and I'm just like, well, just these minor changes. You don't have to become a millionaire to be able to get a chef and all this stuff. Just minor changes you can make. You can empower folks to make better choices for their life. And that means they live longer. They get to be present for their kids longer. They get to be in their communities. They have more opportunity to meet their potential. Because when you feel better, you do better. You know what I mean? You probably speak to that. You're much more motivated when you feel healthy.
Right.
And you're moving about efficiently than when you aren't. And so all these things I think about, like, I think would just lead to much happier people.
In the last 2 months, I've lost about 20 pounds.
Yeah.
I'm all the way in. All the shit, like my whole life, dieting, whatever, I'm kind of on, off, whatever. It's like you read the list of all the things that you should do, and you do half of them, and you keep doing some stuff. You keep drinking. Everybody keeps drinking, usually, even when they're trying to lose weight, whatever. But I've just decided to be like all in. I mean, meal prep, so like that is totally taken care of. I'm working out more than I ever have in my life. Let me tell you, is like the 20 pounds is not even like half the story, because my lungs feel amazing. I just feel great walking around. I just like everything about existing just feels infinitely better having lost 20 pounds. And when I think about some people out there who have, you know, like hundreds of pounds that they could potentially lose, I mean, it is a sinister thing to try to convince people that there is not a lot to be gained in terms of your quality of life by getting in shape.
Yeah, that's why I hate a lot of this like fat acceptance talk. You know? Because I'm all for not shaming people or going after folks and be like, you know, you're fucking like, I know some people see like a random person on Twitter or Instagram like, hey, you're really fat, do you know? Like, I wouldn't go out my way to say stuff.
No,
like
that's just terrible. Yeah.
But I see the other end of the spectrum where people are telling like, you could eat Oreos and not feel bad, or like, you know, eating donuts is not bad for you inherently. I'm like, what are you fucking smoking? You seen like all this frosting on there? Like, we don't have to lie about this shit. We can be honest about these foods are terrible. We can say you have the right to eat them. We don't have to lie and misrepresent. And now you're seeing a lot of national narratives about like, just because you're 300 pounds does not mean that you're unhealthy. I'm like, bitch, have you ever been 300 pounds? Have you ever been close to 300 pounds?
Right.
You know, like, have you ever been overweight? And I have at some points. Bruh, getting up is hard. Wiping your ass is hard. You start breathing heavier. All of a sudden, you got joint problems doing regular shit.
Right.
You running. You feel your ass clap for no reason. Like, you get some dumb experiences.
Right.
And it's not nice. It really is like, you lose motivation for a lot of stuff. I'm not even talking about what anybody comments make to you, just how you physically feel. Right. And so whenever I see this huge amount of cope, it saddens me, because you're encouraging this either form of complacency, or you're even saying like, oh man, indulge.
Yeah.
You want to be gluttonous? Go right ahead.
I mean, our society has such a hard time with complex ideas. Like, because the reality is that, you should be able to be 400 pounds and walk through your fucking life without anybody like calling you a piece of shit or, you know, being cruel to you. And like, we should all have empathy for people that are, you know, obese, whatever. But then at the same time, we should be able to acknowledge that, yeah, losing weight is a very virtuous thing that's going to really improve your quality of life, make you live longer, make your whole experience of everything you do. If you have kids, playing with your kids, etc. And that's why, you know, I kind of think about this a lot, because now that I have a 2-year-old daughter, and it's like, you know, she's a little picky with food, like most kids are. And, you know, you think a lot about what you want them to eat, how much you're willing to budge on them wanting to eat stuff that is not ideal, and what your responsibility is to them. Sometimes I think about the diet that my parents fed me as a kid, and I think they weren't doing me any favors. Now, they didn't know any better, so it's okay, but I would feel guilty if I was feeding my kid fucking pizza and whatever every day. You know, it's just like, I know too much about health, but then at the same time, how do you embed that into your kid without creating this weird thing where, like, you know, you raise your kid super religious and then they want to go have sex with everybody. You raise your kid to never have an Oreo. They want to fucking eat every Oreo in town, right?
It's just environment. And what I mean by that is what you make normal for them, they're going to learn to enjoy.
Right.
My niece is like, she's always at our place, and, you know, she's always eating, and we like pretty much see everything. This girl loves water. That's pretty much all she's ever known. So she's addicted to it. She's like, she drinks it all the time. Even with like healthy foods, you just constantly give it to them. You find out which ones they really like. You can make healthy foods tasty, and they enjoy that. You know, you go to a lot of foreign countries, and they got these like very basic diets, but they're so used to it. The first time they try something that's super sugary, they like, well, this is too much. Like, my taste buds are not used to it. I don't like it. And so I think if you just make her adapted to the healthy foods early on, and you make that normal for her, well, then that's going to be her normal.
But then you also want to be able to say, hey, like, we don't always eat ice cream, but sometimes we eat ice cream. You know, it's like, it's fun to have a snack or a treat, but this shouldn't be your everyday routine. But then it's also like, you just wonder, like, to what extent are they going to be able to understand that? And I feel like then it's going to be every night, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream. You know,
you can't indulge it. I think, like, well, listen, I mean, everyone's got to parent their own way. I'm not here to tell people how to raise their kids, but if you can set your kid up for success in life, and it doesn't, it just requires saying no sometimes when it's for their best. And I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing in the world. I think when it comes to foods, if you understand what it does to them, and if you can encourage a healthier life, if they want to be adults and want to start eating fattening shit, that you can't do nothing about it at that point.
Right.
But if you want to set them up in an environment where they're eating really good, tasty foods that are healthy, then I think that's the best outcome possible.
Definitely. You know? Okay, so me and you, I'm pretty sure you're in the same boat as me, that when we did that last interview, that you didn't even know who Destiny was, right? I didn't. I
knew who he was.
Okay.
I knew who he was, but I wasn't like in contact with him.
Right.
Yeah.
But then, like, I became a big fan at some point, and like kind of around the same time, it seems like you started to watch it and started to go on there.
Yeah.
How'd you become aware of him? And then, like, what kind of stuff have you felt like you've been trying to communicate about? Because it feels like we maybe get like a little bit deeper version of you than on your YouTube channel, or you like indulge ideas more in depth, whereas your stuff is a little bit more comedy when it's you and Preach, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I knew him from like, I think it's like 3.5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. He did an interview with John Tron. You ever seen that thing?
No.
John Tron was like a YouTuber at the time who had like a bit of a PC image, and then he went on that show and he was basically like, keep black people away, and then like that blew up, and that's when I first.
Oh shit!
It was a wild interview. But,
I've seen it because I like looked at his most popular videos and saw it and was just like, I'm not watching this 4-year-old video. Whatever.
Oh man, some of them were classics. Some of them were like actual classics. They're hilarious to watch because he used to do like aggressive debating, and so you would see him go at people, and it's wild. It gets very contentious, and that can be entertaining.
Because I also like his other style where he'll go in front of somebody like Jesse Lee Peterson and just act like really meek and like just like a nice friendly guy, and just kind of he's like trolling. He's trolling through niceness.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a very weird concept that I kind of learned from him. Yeah.
If you spend enough time online, I think it helps you learn better strategies.
But then you'll see him argue with somebody from his chat, and he's just like eviscerating them for a tiny little detail about something that they're disagreeing with.
We all got our trigger points. We all got our trigger points.
Yeah, and when it's insular, when it's coming from the inside, it hurts a lot more.
Yeah.
Or it feels like it's demanding of a more nuanced
I think
response.
It's just certain things. Like if someone says something that's so incredibly stupid in a serious tone, like you really think that? You know, sometimes it gets you, and that's when you get trolled.
Well, someone can ask you a stupid question, and it's like, whatever. Yeah. But if somebody asks you a stupid question while acting like they know more than you, that can really set you off.
Yeah,
you know?
how you phrase things.
Somebody could ask me like, oh, so you deal with a lot of gang members. Like, they ever shoot each other in front of you? And it's like, it's such a stupid question that I would just have to give like a sincere answer. Be like, no, it's not like that. But if somebody was like, well, what about this game? This is like, and it didn't really seem like they were coming from an intellectually honest place, that's when you get the really snarky, horrible version of me, you know?
You being snarky with people?
Yeah, for sure. I get a lot of shit sometimes because while I kind of meta analyze people's like podcasting skills on the weekly podcast, like my co-hosts and stuff, I'll kind of like tell them things that I see as being not the best technique, I guess you could say, on air.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, some people would prefer to see that happen behind the scenes. I'm such a student of podcasting that to me that comes very naturally. Like, and even in all my relationships, like my girl can say a joke to me that I don't appreciate that like hurts my feelings, and I'll just be like, I don't like that. Like, I don't like when you talk to me like that. Just like freeze the fucking conversation, and I'll just be super honest about it. And I kind of feel like that's like the best way to go about it. You know, I don't like to let it linger and build up.
I disagree, and I'll tell you why. I don't think there's anything wrong with you voicing the fact you don't like something or anybody does. I think when you criticize somebody in front of others, I think it's different.
That is true. It's a very different dynamic.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I've had issues with friends before, whatever, and I'll just take them aside after. Like they might have said something out of pocket in front of other folks. Now, afterwards, if I had to confront them in front of everybody, well, then their ego might be checked or their pride, and they feel like they're being chin checked in front of everybody else. Whereas if I check them elsewhere, then I'm just like, hey, bro, when you said that shit was foul. It was out of pocket.
Hugely different dynamic is like somebody says something you don't like in the group chat, and then you text them separately, and you tell them like, hey, bro, I didn't like that. Versus like you say in the group chat, hey, rah, rah, rah. So different when there's an audience.
Absolutely.
Changes the fucking energy of what you're saying. Like you're a million times more likely to get, hey, I'm sorry, bro, I didn't mean to disrespect you, rah, rah, rah. Like versus doing it in the chat with everybody, you're a million times more likely to get, nah, fuck you, you did this one time, yada yada, you know?
Yeah, those are just. I always think about things efficiently. You may want to say something in that moment in front of everybody, but what's the outcome you actually want? And if you think past your emotions in that moment, you know you just want to be good and you want the person not to do that again. You don't want a falling out. And that kind of stuff can easily lead to a fallout. Because if they refuse to apologize in front of everyone, then you getting called a bitch, and then you've already voiced you're unhappy about something. They refuse, right? So I always think about, how do I bridge this gap?
And you want to create an environment in which people are less likely to become entrenched in their opinions, you know, because a lot of times that happens where things become very tribal and like you just sort of like latch onto an opinion. That's your opinion. It becomes representative of your worldview, and it would take a really heroic effort for you to change your mind. And that's like not a place that I'm trying to be in. I want to keep my mind open. You know, I want to be able to admit when I'm wrong. And it's like, that's what you need to be striving for. And when you're doing this in front of an audience, it becomes a lot less likely that that's, you know, going to take place.
I mean, the same thing can be said for like just relationships in general. Like when I see people having their relationships all online all the time, you invite fans into the dynamic. You let them talk to you like that. All this other stuff. You're inviting a lot of opinions that make it much harder to maintain things. Whereas if you have an issue just between two people, it's a lot easier to manage. It's take online away. Even when the family's always involved in every relationship fight, or friends, like she got an issue with you, she go talk to all her friends, tells everybody else. Now they think you're an asshole because they keep hearing bad shit about you instead of coming to see you about the issue that she has with you. You know what I'm saying? So those are ways in which just having too many voices involved in a conflict make things exponentially worse, because her friends are gassing her up because her friends have only heard negative things about you, because most of the time when she tells her friends something, it's mostly the bad stuff. Right. So they're coming in with their input of their idea of who you are, and then she's going back supercharged with her battery pack has been, all these bitches have been telling her the worst things possible. She comes to see you and she's carrying all that stuff, whereas she just came to you off the top.
Right.
It's a different thing.
I did my girls podcast, and at one point there's like a moment where, you know, we've had very different conversational styles. I'm very aggressive. She's very, you know, polite and nice. And we started kind of having the conversation about me cheating early in the relationship. And a lot of her fans were not fucking with the dynamic, because you start to see real quick that I consider it to just be like normal. Like, yeah, early in the relationship, I was cheating. We've been together 6 years. Yeah, was fucking around in the beginning. That's how I had to figure out that I liked you. So like, I had to cheat for a while. Then I realized I liked you enough to stop cheating, right? It was kind of like this dynamic of me being kind of callous about it, and then her sort of revealing that she was more hurt by it than probably I even knew. And she was kind of like revealing that on the podcast. And yeah, I got a taste of that, of like her audience very much not really seeing my side of it at all. Whereas if that exact same conversation happened on here, I feel like 100% they would have seen where I was coming from, and it would have seemed much more normal.
I mean, because they've seen more of you.
Right.
And so they understand you better. Whereas her fans feel probably more indebted to her or follow her.
Massively,
For example,
yeah.
if you're having a conversation with her and you say something out of pocket, she's not like, yo, this dude said something, he's an asshole. She's saying, this guy I've known for years, who's helped me out when my mom was dying, who's been there with me, birthing kids or whatever it is. The person who's shared like some of the most beautiful has said something I didn't like. The fans are just saying, this guy's dating somebody I really like, and he cheated on her. What a fucking asshole. And it's fair to them because they don't know you, right? And so that's why I mean, they're coming in with the wrong information, giving their take on a relationship that they don't really understand nearly as well. So yeah.
But it's interesting too because it's like that's the whole nature of a relationship is that there are going to be things that you disagree on or that you value differently, and your one disagreement, like that disagreement or that moment where you saw that this thing was different from my perspective than it was for hers. To her fans in isolation, that seems like a big enough issue that the fucking whole relationship shouldn't exist, you know? Yeah. Whereas, like, there's been a million things like that. Like, there's a million things that we fucking don't see eye to eye on, and we have to kind of figure out where we stand, middle ground of something we're comfortable with, whatever. And
I think you also view cheating differently.
Oh, yeah. No, that's the whole thing. Yeah.
There's a million things as bad as cheating because I would be like, damn, that's wild, bro.
No, but I'm saying, no, not as bad as that. But to me, it almost seems like expected that successful guys are going to act out in that way, at least early on. Like, so to me, the fact that I don't seems like very virtuous. Like, I should be admired for this. I should be treated with respect for the fact that, yeah, maybe I cheated early on and I stopped. Like, that to me is like, how is that not good enough? That's fucking crazy.
Because who's your audience?
Yeah.
You're living by rules from a different perspective.
Right.
You got to understand who's listening.
My audience would think it was insane if, Lil Baby's girlfriend made a video where she was saying, this motherfucker cheated on me. But 100% of the audience would say no shit. Yeah. So it's very different expectations. Yeah, that's fair. I think because you probably expose them to that information or they've been exposed with people who are adjacent to you. Right. I think most people are just not used to that. Like even when the Adam Levine stuff was happening. Yeah. And the wife just kind of glossed over it afterwards. It's like the reason why she glossed over it is because either she knows and they have some kind of understanding or she understands what it is to be in that realm when you're married to these super rich, famous people. Right. Right? She's a supermodel, but she's Victoria's Secret, the Bahati lady. Yeah, think right? So, yeah. Yeah. I mean, she probably dated some other rich, famous people. It's not like she's unaware of what that life is like, right? So these people come into these conversations like, man, I would never, but you're living in a different society. The same way you would probably never wear a burqa for your husband, but you don't live in Saudi Arabia, right? You don't live in these countries where that shit's mandatory. So it's a different environment. Right. Like that, because we all live in Los Angeles, but the motherfucker living in Beverly Hills lives a different existence than the person living in Compton. Same society, different circles, different planes of existence, right? They might intersect on the street at some point or at a random party, but the truth is they're living in different worlds. Right. Right. Because I see the Ace family is so big that they kind of have like an anti-fandom. They like a lot of people who like very much make it their business to like monitor things going on in the Ace family world that they don't like, which is kind of like, that's a invention of the internet over the last however many years, is turning people into lol cows and just sort of observing their downfall or whatever. And with the Ace family, it's a weird one because I've seen maybe like 100 girls come out on the internet and say Ozzy McBroom DM'd me basically trying to fuck, There's been like all kinds of shit that just makes it obvious that he is fucking. Yeah. And over and over and over, we see his wife not react to it in any significant way. She never really fires back. She never like seems like she's publicly upset about it. Who the fuck knows what's going on behind the scenes? But it would seem that they have some kind of arrangement because I doubt if every time she catches this fool DMing a girl, it's a big deal, then it would have been a big deal 100 times. It would be a big deal 1,000 times. It's like, it's just like they clearly have some kind of arrangement. But that's weird too, is that people don't want to discuss the arrangement. You could share your whole life with people, but if the truth is that you're poly and you are okay with your wife sleeping with another guy and she's okay with you sleeping with another girl, you kind of like have to share that with the world too. But I can see how for the Ace family that would be very detrimental to their image. The huge percentage of people are not going to understand that. They're not going to accept it. If we can say we want to accept people who are poly, but I don't think society at large does. No. And especially if you're seen as like something positive or role model-y, people are going to look at you completely different. Like, let's say LeBron admitted it. He said, we're in a poly, or like, we got an arrangement. Right. And she knows what it is. And it's been like that since the jump. Yeah.
people would lose complete. Like, there's so many people that would turn on because he's got a squeaky clean image, even though he's out there doing his nonsense, right? And he's doing whatever he does, and he does it very cleanly.
Every comment, oh, so and so is fucking yo bitch, and you could be totally okay with your wife being out fucking other guys. But the fact that it's being drawn to your attention like that over and over, you could imagine how the average guy, even a guy like LeBron who has no reason to be insecure, would not want that to be shared with the world. Like, our society's not fucking ready to have that conversation.
No, but one thing that people don't want to accept, but it is true, is like all these guys are doing it. And like these athletes, like, I don't care how and people are surprised by this. But like, you know this, like, there's folks who their literal job is to find women for these people.
Right.
They go to the Instagram models, or they go to these people who are models or whatever it is. They have their directory. The NBA player or whatever athlete or famous person literally just says her for this amount. Everyone's tested, everyone's set up, and they just...
This to me is something where I feel like the law of diminishing returns just really kicks in. It's like, I feel like once you start getting pussy on an industrial level, it's just not going to be enjoyable to me in the same way. I would like to think that if I had $100 million fall in my lap right now, that I just would not then start spending a huge amount of my time lining up, a dozen sex partners on a Friday night. Like, I just don't really see the value.
Okay, I'll tell you the value is twofold. One, a lot of these NBA players or athletes or what are these folks, they all get married fairly young. They get married sub 25 and start having kids. So they didn't have that many partners. Two,
True.
Because they're married and they have a public image and they got brands to protect, they can't afford to be caught up with an Instagram DM from a random bitch like Adam Levine was. Because Adam Levine only had that scandal, but imagine if he had a bunch of brand deals on anything, that fucks it up for him, right?
But it's
You're going to be
interesting
risking so much money, even though you want to be out here fucking and you want to be getting with these women, you can't afford to risk it because it costs you too much.
But look how Adam Levine had this big negative PR thing just from basically flirting. And then meanwhile, like, a lot of other people get held to a very different standard. There's a lot of celebrities who could basically be caught in the middle of a cheating allegation and it wouldn't make it anywhere past like gossip or some shit, But Adam Levine's image was squeaky enough that alone was shocking. The Try Guys or whatever, that dude who was, dating or cheating on his wife with a female employee, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a lot of walks of life in which that would not really like raise too many alarm bells. I mean, Elon Musk did it. He had twins with an executive at Tesla.
I mean, hey, man.
This year. I don't know.
Responsibility to repopulate or something like that. That's what he was saying.
Hey, and much respect to him. But it's just interesting how Adam Levine apparently is held to a way different standard than Elon Musk.
He deserves an opportunity. If he can make another super genius baby, I don't care how many people he cheats on.
Yeah. No, yeah. I like...
If it's an opportunity, let's get it.
I like him exploring this way of life of like creating all these different kids. I like seeing Nick Cannon do it too. He just like announced 2 different babies on the way in the same week. I mean,
Nick Cannon is wilding, bro.
I wish I could do an interview with Nick Cannon where he would be real with me about what his life is like and how he manages this, because my girl was asking me that. She's like, how do you think he could possibly spend time with the kids? And I'm like, well, the one time I went to his space, I did notice at one point like a woman, presumably one of the girls that he's spending time with, or maybe one of the baby moms, she came in and like talked to him for a little while and stuff, and then at some point she left. I don't know what the fuck happened, but you could imagine that it's probably a lot of like them coming to him while he's going through his work throughout the day, I would imagine.
Hey, bro, if we keep it in a stack, we can laugh about it because it's funny on the outside, but that shit got to be kind of fucked up to have a dad who's like got 5 other moms and he's going to prioritize his time differently, Like if one mom lives in Seattle, the other one lives in LA, the other one lives in New York, the other one, he can't be everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
So these kids are going to get neglected in terms of actual quality time with like a fathering mentor. So, we can laugh about it. It is funny to imagine. But yeah, I think it is fucked up for the children.
Yeah, it definitely could be. I just wonder in his head what the ideal situation is, what the ideal average weekly schedule is. Feels like no matter how it works out, it's probably not going to really be ideal.
I mean, think about your kid and how often your wife needs help with stuff, or how often you're present and you're watching that development.
Right.
And now imagine taking all that and like reducing it by 95%.
Right.
Like, how well do you know that person? How attached are you?
Well, my biggest worry about having another kid is just, well, am I going to really be able to enjoy our kid right now once we have a baby to be dealing with as much? It's like, because it feels like having a kid has slowed my life down in so many significant ways. Like, yes, I'm still grinding really hard in terms of doing a ton of content and working hard, but it's like just forced me to be able to sit in the living room without my phone for 2 hours and play with her fucking toys and joke around with her and sing songs or whatever. It's like I've never had anything in my life that caused me to like slow down this much, and that's to me is amazing. And I think if I had 12 kids, it would be very much the opposite effect, where it would be like just this insanely hectic thing if you did end up spending a good amount of time with them.
Yeah,
and that I don't know, like, if that's even realistic to think that you're going to spend a good amount of time with.
I mean,
Can the moms be around each other? I'm sure it's a lot of different dynamics.
No, they're not spending time. There's no way, because they're going to remarry eventually. They're going to find some mate. They're going to be going through their own thing. Finding a husband or anybody who's going to be comfortable with the idea of you hanging around with other baby mamas at your baby daddy's, like, that's a wild thing, bro.
Because it's hard for us to kind of fathom that it's like these women who, from what I've seen, are attractive, women that anyone would be happy to put a baby in, and that they're like pretty happy with having a small slice of one very successful man's life, whereas most women seem like they are aspiring to really monopolize this one successful man.
Absolutely not. That's not true at all, man. I'm telling you, there's so many women out there who want to just get the baby by the dude, and if he offers to pay on a regular basis, they good. Because as you can imagine, for a lot of these women, having a child with somebody who's like making really wealthy amounts of money isn't happening for a lot of them. It's not easy. They might be able to get fucked by them, but in terms of actually having a kid with them and being financially secure afterwards, a lot of rich dudes are just too smart about this shit now. Right? They're much smart. So for them, it's a great opportunity. They have a child that they've always wanted because they've always wanted a kid. They're financially taken care of, so they have flexibility for their entire lives from now on. You know what I mean? They got a paycheck, and a sizable one.
I guess you frame it that way.
I mean, think about it. How many women in their 30s you know right now who really want kids? And think about adopting. I know so many who are thinking about adopting or getting the one by themselves. You hear about it all the time. Like,
why adopt when you can just have a baby with Nick Cannon?
That's what I'm saying. And get $30K a month or whatever it is that he's probably sending these ladies.
Yeah, when you put it like that.
I mean, it's a good deal.
Yeah, I mean, I just
think it's degenerate in terms of like the society, but it's a good deal on an individual level.
I remember AD did me a disservice at one point because he said to me, listen, because I'm like kind of talking about being a dad. This is before I was a dad, and I'm like, talking about it. He goes, listen, I know a lot of people who are fucked up dads. He's like, if you're around and you're not fucked up on drugs, you actually spend some quality time with them. He's like, if you don't die, you did what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And I liked it. And I said it to my girl, and she just kind of gives me the death stare of like, I actually expect more of you than you just being around and not dying. And I'm like, okay, that is fair as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the low expect. I understand where he's coming from, though.
Because he's seen the other side of it so much that when you get sent to prison or you die, then you're a bad dad. Like you're not able to be a good dad.
Or it's just weird when you live in the area and like nobody knows their dad or all their dads are dead or gone. You get what I'm saying? Like, that's normal. When that's normal, just someone being around is novelty. It's like when you've been homeless your whole life, just having like a 1-bedroom apartment is like, oh, this shit, like this is lit. Like,
100%.
I got privacy, a bedroom. And it's nice, and I like coming home. Like, yeah. So I can understand where he's coming from.
You just keep leveling up your happiness level, and things keep seeming normal to you over and over. I remember Dan Bilzerian telling Joe Rogan, like, that when he got a Ferrari or whatever, when he was, in his 20s, it was like his happiness was on a 10 from that Ferrari.
Really?
And now there's no car that could probably even really have an effect on his happiness. But then meanwhile, a Honda Civic will probably be a negative on his happiness.
Yeah.
I don't want to see Dan Bilzerian in a Honda Civic. It sounds disgusting. He doesn't even seem like it would fit. But, that's just kind of like everything in life's like that. And that's why I'm kind of like determined to not indulge so much. Every time I got a new car throughout my whole life, every 3-4 years or whatever, I just lease now. But the car always gets a little bit better. But I'm really not trying to go like BMW to Lambo.
No.
It's just like maybe like a little bit better every time you upgrade. That's cool.
I think having kids kind of changes that. Like, I can't speak to the same thing because I haven't had one yet, but just the person I live with, they had a child, and she's always around her place all the time. And so like I've grown super attached to her. It's like literally morphed my brain in a weird way. It's because I'm taking her out, we're feeding her, I'm changing that. I'm just around all the time around her. And it's beautiful.
The appeal of kids becomes a lot easier to understand once you're like directly close to somebody else having a kid. It just becomes like, I could do that. I get it. Yeah.
Initially I was standoffish because I'm like, whatever, y'all just do your thing. I'm chill in my room with her, But then, all of a sudden they start grabbing your hand, tell you, come play or do whatever stuff, or they're just like, I'm busy working on YouTube all the time and numbers and all this shit. Now I'm sitting down, we drawing. You know what I'm saying? Or we doing something stupid where she's putting like blocks through a little hole, and I'm just like, yeah, you did it wrong. Turn it around, stupid, right? And like my brain just goes into a completely different place, and I'm like, I don't know when I felt like this in a long time.
Right.
I felt good about certain things, and I've enjoyed certain things, but this is a novel feeling for me, and so I think that's when I realized, like, okay. I think as you get older, like the toys and stuff are all cool and they're stuff you can enjoy, but you realize like investing in children is just like a completely different ballgame.
Because if and I'm constantly in that situation where I'm stuck on the computer, I'm writing titles, I'm trying to cram through my emails, whatever, and then my kid is just up in my face like, Dada, do this with me, rah, rah, rah. And it's like your brain is fighting against like hustle culture, being productive, entertaining your audience, keeping your lifestyle going, and then just having a pure moment of connection.
Ooh.
And it's literally like if you're making a YouTube video and if your main metric that you're judging yourself by in life is how many people are affected or entertained or impressed by the things that you do, when you're making a YouTube video, a lot of times in your head it's like 600, 700, a million people are going to see this.
And small, enjoy it.
And then on the other hand, you spend time with your kid and she's the only one who appreciates it. It's just right now. She will forget. She won't remember this tomorrow, but it still seems like so much more important. And that war in your brain between being productive and just being in the moment with your kid is a battle that has like fundamentally kind of shaped how I view life at this point in the past couple of years.
Oh yeah, there's nothing that's like changed it more for me. I remember even girls would hit me up, like, "Yo, what are you doing tonight?" I'm like, "I'm with my niece." It's like, no, really. I'm like, no, I'm serious. It's like, I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm chilling.
Right.
Like, I'm spending tonight with my niece. We hanging out. We having a good time. We eating some good food. We chilling.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have to hesitate. I remember I used to move everything around my schedule for pussy before.
Right.
Now I'm just like, no, I'm home with the fam, and we going to the park. I'm gonna watch her run around in circles like an idiot, and I'm gonna love every second of it because I think as that process comes into your life, you start to realize like, oh, this is the next chapter.
Yeah.
I can't explain why. I couldn't tell you on a board like this is why you should get your job afterwards when you're 18 and get your own place and start being an adult. I can't tell you why. Like once you turn around like 30, like the kid thing is the next portion. But once you've been in it, you're like, it feels so natural. I don't know if it's a biological imprint or whatever it is.
Right.
But like your brain chemistry, like what you described, changes.
I look at a lot of people that I went to high school with, and within the first couple of years after high school or college, they're 22, 23, 24. They got kids. They're fucking. They got an apartment, or they maybe are buying a house with their girl or whatever. They're getting married. And when I was younger, I would look at that and think, you are fucking pathetic. Like that to me is so lame. You married a girl you went to high school with. You're settling down. You don't even know what you're capable of in terms of your potential, in terms of making money, or I'm traveling. I'm working on this business. I'm making these videos. I really feel like I'm doing what's important because I'm pushing myself to see what the best version of myself can be. Yeah. And now I look back at that and I'm like, oh, they just got it before me, that having a family and a connection and like really bringing something real into the world is I don't even want to say it's like better, but it's at the very least equal, I would say, in terms of like, then on the other hand, like hustling your whole life and trying to become this thing, like, because I don't want to take away from that, because that's still just like such a big part of me, is to just be a grinder and to really want to like be the best thing that I could be. But then at the same time, like now I'm in this fucking world of balance where I just have to fucking make both work,
Yeah, you're nurturing, which is a completely different feeling. You're like watching a child grow older, like you literally watch their like limbs expand, and they're reaching for stuff they couldn't even touch before, and they're doing things with their fingers and hands like they couldn't do before. So it's just watching that development. You're seeing them grow, and they're changing based off how you treat them.
The thing for me is the sentences. Watching the language develop as a person who I've always loved slang. I've always loved language. I've always loved just like seeing how people communicate, and seeing her just like figure out how to describe the world around her is the most amazing thing ever.
Absolutely. When she started using 2 words in a sentence, like she was like, give me, or when she say stuff like that, I'm just like the evolution, like Pokemon, watching your fucking Pokemon, like Pikachu turn into like a whatever it is.
I think the first time might have been me farting and her saying dada poo poo. Like, and it's like I'm screaming into the other room. She said dada poo poo. What the fuck?
That one gets me. That's cool.
Yeah, man. Wait, so okay, we totally lost track of this. What led you into the Destiny universe, and what are the conversations that mean something to you that you've been having in that realm?
I think my politics lean left, and I think generally in the political sphere, there's no one that lean left as a content creator that I find like bearable. I find they're all very cringy or all like very like adjacent to SJW. So for me, it's like hard to listen to.
Very much relate to this sentiment, yeah.
Yeah.
With him in particular, because he just doesn't like fall into a lot of that shit that you don't like about the average person on the left.
Yeah, and so I think once I was put on Destiny, and then I just started watching regularly, I think I grew an appreciation for it. And then we just have conversations offline. They were good, and so we just started talking about certain issues, and then it was cool to kind of flesh out ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're kind of going to him for like education? Are you trying to like really expand your viewpoint, or do you feel like you're just kind of laying out your thought process? Because I watched Destiny having this conversation with Geordie on the other day, and you were involved with it, and it's kind of like interesting because Gideon's perspective on voting and stuff, or like being involved in society, I was just kind of like, I feel like this is an interesting moment for Destiny to try. Like, how hard does he want to go in describing why it's important to like participate in your local government? Because I could tell that he didn't really. I'm looking at the chat, and they're like really not appreciating Gideon's perspective on why voting is not important. Yeah. And it's just like, there's many different tones that Destiny could take in this kind of conversation.
Yeah, and I think like all content creators, I think if you want to grow in this space, you have to learn to wear different hats at different times. You have to learn how to approach different situations differently. The way I'm going to have a conversation with Gideon on certain topics is going to be very different than the way I'm going to have a conversation with like a manosphere type of person on certain topics, right? And so
because one is kind of accepting of the fact that he doesn't know everything, and one kind of just acts like he knows everything.
Right.
Those are fundamental, huge differences.
If I feel like someone's a scammer, it's going to completely change the way I'm going to talk to them versus someone's uninformed or someone's really just curious, right? Like you approach it very differently. Someone's genuinely asking me questions like uncertain. I'm not going to come at them with like anger and vitriol if someone's literally stealing from other people. You get what I'm trying to say? So yeah, I think for Destiny that's probably true as well, and that's how he fosters like better relationships. I think the whole voting thing, I understand where like Gideon and like. Most people, like a lot of people watching right now, if you polled your audience and asked them if they vote, a lot of them say that's a waste of time.
I didn't vote in the midterms, and my only excuse is just that I honestly didn't even fucking think about it.
Yeah.
But then hearing Gideon's reason for not voting, of being like, is my vote really going to change anything? Well, I mean, there's a lot of Senate races right now that are coming down to like a couple thousand people.
Absolutely.
So I do think that like the average American is probably better off if they were to like consider it a little bit of their civic duty to just try to like learn more about this and actually care about voting. I wish that it was something that and I'm a victim of this too, because I've only voted twice for president, and it's like, but to take an interest in that should be something that is somehow we're able to incentivize as a community.
I think the problem I was laying out over there is one, I think most people who don't vote do not believe that the system works, and so they're like, why would I vote for a system I believe is fundamentally broken? Right? They truly believe that. So first you have to change that perception that it doesn't work. If you make people believe, I remember a whole bunch of people started voting when they found out they were going to get checks from Biden. Right? They found out they were going to get some checks if they voted one person in. They said, "Oh, we showing up to the polls." They told me, you got to make them believe that the system actually works for what it is that they want.
Right.
Done. Once they believe that it works for what they want done, then I think you already bring a lot of people to the table. The second part of it, and this is where I was coming into place, I think you should just incentivize people to go vote. And some people thought it was crazy. I'm like, just give everybody $100 for voting. Which
I don't think that's about. Yeah, well,
I mean, if you think it's that important and we think it's that good, you know what I mean? Just give everybody $100 for voting. They just show up, they get cash.
It's just interesting because you're then like incentivizing the lowest information voters, because the smarter you are, the less you need $100 on average. And the dumber you are, the more, or the less you've thought. The people who know the least about politics and society are the people who really need $100.
Right.
So that's a little, because then you're gonna see like this whole thing of like fucking people constantly courting the homeless vote and the like total despair vote, where it's like you're gonna have Ron DeSantis and Skid Row trying to get them to vote for him, marching them to the polls.
That's already happening, because I'm pretty sure if you polled most voters on most issues, they don't know anything about whatever it is that's been happening.
Yeah, it's popular.
Right. So I agree. If the outcome we want is for most people to vote, you just incentivize it, and then you can find programs after which you can you tell people if you're going to do this already, well, this is some information you might need.
What we want is not really people voting. We want people to be extremely well versed in politics and then vote, which is a big ask.
Yeah, yeah, and that's already not happening right now. So I figure if it's not happening right now, then let's just get everybody to vote. But that was my idea. But all this to say, during that conversation, I thought it was great because you have somebody who's very politically active, who's done like campaigning or who's done like canvassing to get people to vote, and you have somebody who's never voted and represents like a large demographic of people who do not vote for various reasons. And so
yeah, and when I heard that, I immediately sent it to my group chat just because I felt like it was such a similar dynamic to the kind of conversation that I would like to have with, some of my co-hosts and stuff, where it's like, I would love if they, took more of an interest in politics and stuff. It's not like I'm demanding it of them or anything, but if they did, that would be great. And here we have like the perfect representation of that, of like, Gideon and you and fucking Destiny, kind of all in on very different depths of like, how much you've bothered to learn about politics.
yeah.
And that's a very interesting conversation, I think, to play out.
Yeah. Your co-hosts, most of them are black, right?
Many.
Yeah, many.
Not terribly politically active black dudes, though.
If you asked them if they believe the system worked, most of them replied no.
If I phrased the question like that, yeah, for sure. But ultimately, I think that they also probably would be very open to the idea that, because you only need to be exposed to like a couple of issues that you really give a shit about. And that's why
I don't think that's enough, though. I don't think that's enough. The reason being is you have to understand they view voting and that as an extension of the police and a lot of other departments. And so their interactions with authority oftentimes is positive.
But if you can disentangle it from that because there's just one issue that stands out to you so much and you care so much about it, like for me, in terms of if I'm going to vote for a Democrat or if I'm going to vote for a Republican, I mean, like the midterm elections, I was very happy with the way they went because I considered it to be kind of a referendum on Trump as a person, who I'm very much not fond of, abortion as a major issue in which I'm very much pro-choice, and the election denialism as well. Is like, these are three things that I can never vote Republican as long as these are key components of being a Republican, right? And I am a person who has many conservative viewpoints, so it's like I would like to see a Republican Party that I could conceivably vote for at some point in my life, just because I can imagine a version of the Republican Party that's not as consumed with conspiracy theories and all this bullshit that they currently are, scaremongering, whatever. And it's like, there are real issues that they bring to the table that I agree with on immigration and other things. But, it's like for me now at this point in my life, it's very easy to see how voting matters because even just right there's a handful of issues that I need to have my say on. And I realize I also did not vote this time around. But in general, I would like to have a say on.
Yeah, the comment section will roast you for that one.
I don't care.
Adam here talking, he only voted twice.
No, I'm not like shaming anybody for not voting. I'm just saying why I think it's important, even though I didn't in this particular situation. But I'm trying to make it more of a real part of my routine every couple of years or however often voting takes place, since I have no idea.
Yeah. I don't take too much interest as far as like the political sphere goes. Like I'm not even someone who votes, so I really have no leg to speak on. But I also don't really give many great excuses. People are like, "Yo, that's a bad thing." I'm like, "Yeah, you're absolutely right." I just own it.
I'm very okay.
I'm not even gonna sit here and be like, "That everything's just." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm being really lazy and I own that."
But I'm very okay with being a person. I don't want to present myself as somebody who's acting like they have all the answers.
Yeah,
I'm a guy who's watching the news and reading Twitter and trying to make sense of what's going on, and then I have conversations on camera, and it is what it is. And I don't want to become some ideologue that has to strap myself to one side or the other, and that in and of itself is kind of like confusing for people with you as a public figure, where forever if I take a stance on Twitter that's like very progressive, I will have a bunch of fucking people like, well, didn't you say this? They'll bring up something completely unrelated that doesn't align with the progressive shit. And meanwhile, too, like I'll say something that kind of aligns with conservatives, and it's like, well, you voted for Joe Biden. It's like, yeah, I'm not such a boring fucking mouthpiece for either party that I just agree with everything that they do,
Yeah, I find talking about this topic very contentious, just because everything is so like along party lines, and you don't toe the line perfectly. Everyone starts yelling.
Right.
I'm just like, bro, I don't care enough, and I'm certainly not going to waste my time, having myself align with one group or the other side. I just generally don't even get myself too involved. And if it starts to get deep, but it's important to, somebody has to. I just know for me personally, I was just like, I'll pass. Next topic.
But to me, there's like levels of conversation in terms of podcasts and content creation, and I kind of consider like politics to be one of the harder ones. It's like, anybody who's like graduated high school can probably get on a podcast and have a conversation about relationships.
Absolutely.
It's the easiest thing in the world to talk about.
Yeah.
Or food, or you know, like
Relatable.
anything. Like these are all things that are like anybody can have a perspective on it. Yeah. To talk about politics and not sound like an idiot is tough. Like it takes years and years and years of paying attention, you know? So
Absolutely.
For me, even a couple of years ago, I would have just told you straight up, like, I don't like talking about politics on camera because it's not my forte. Clearly I'm better suited to talk about this music shit and this cultural shit. But for me in the long run, I kind of see that as like a more of a challenge, is that, you know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what is going to be the shit that actually excites me about having conversations on camera enough? I feel like it's just going to be bigger and bigger political issues.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be talking to 20-year-old drill rappers.
And I do. I would love to. Because I would love to still be able to talk to a 20-year-old drill rapper when I'm 48. But how likely is it? And if I can do it, what are the odds that people are going to want to see me doing it? Now, because I felt like that way about rap forever. For like I was doing the BMX content, and I just didn't feel like I knew, or like I didn't have enough stamps to be like, I can really talk about rap on the internet. And then I started to do it, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And I'm like getting better at it so much faster because I'm doing it out in public, you know? Yeah. Whereas with politics, it's kind of like that too. It's like over time, I might bite off more.
I wanted to ask you about that topic. When it comes to the more, and I could be wrong because I don't know your entire catalog, but when it comes to the more high-profile rappers or like rap artists, do they generally not take you up on interviews, or does that not happen as often?
Well, there's like a weird dynamic where all the biggest rappers, like a Drake or a Lil Baby or a Lil Uzi or a Playboi Carti, you know, they interview almost never. Maybe like once every couple of years they'll do one, you know? There's like a big value in being kind of mysterious.
Yeah, sure.
And once you're at the top of the game, you know, Kendrick Lamar just dropped a fucking album for the first time in 5 years, and I believe he didn't do an interview to accompany it, which is like he just has that power. At this point in his career, like the biggest rappers can just really take it or leave it, whereas like the younger rappers kind of need the look, they need the exposure. So it's a little bit of a weird dynamic, and especially now too, because there are so many options. If Drake wants to do an interview, he just has every option at his disposal. He could do a hip hop look, he could do a non-hip hop look, he could go on any fucking platform in the world and give it to him, and be able to control the narrative, which is really, really important. None of these artists are down to take the risk of taking an L in an interview, you know?
Yeah.
Drake did the Rap Radar podcast with Elliot Wilson and B-Dot, and it came out on Drake's YouTube channel. Yes. It was edited by Drake's team. I mean, that's nobody's ever even considered asking me for that kind of shit.
You know, one of the big mistakes Kanye made is just that I say mistakes, but whatever's cost him is obviously an issue, is that he took so many interviews, and he's doing this stuff because he wants to speak out. But I'm pretty confident that if most rappers spoke unfiltered on enough podcasts, they would say things just as bad, if not worse, than you. I don't even believe...
I wouldn't say most rappers are really familiar with a lot of the right-wing talking points that he knows about, you know?
Yes, maybe not in regards to like the Jewish stuff or any of that, but about different topics.
True.
You know, and I think it would color their public perception completely different.
Well, and that's why you get somebody like Lil Durk. I bet Lil Durk is so much fun to talk to behind the scenes. But if you get him on a podcast, he's not going to say shit. If he had, for some reason, he trusted you enough to tell you what he thought about his enemies and why would he ever do that? Like, these guys are just smart enough to, at this point, to just clam up and not give you what you want in that regard. But look at Drake. Drake just dropped an album. There's like maybe like 10 bars that are like gossipy, like, you know, him dissing Serena Williams' husband, him making a thing about Megan Thee Stallion not getting shot, whatever. Like, these all are just like big talking points that he's allowed to like use to promote the album. Part of Kanye's problem now is that if he does another interview today, it's not going to really be that big of an appetite to hear it because he's kind of already done so many interviews in recent memory.
What, Kanye?
Yeah.
You think so?
No, I mean, it's still a big market, trust me, but it's not going to be as big as it was when the Drink Champs one came out a couple months ago because he's kind of playing himself, like the Lex Friedman one. We saw much less exploration of what he was saying on that show because he had already done the Drink Champs and everything like that. Yeah. So, but meanwhile with Drake, you don't hear shit from him for years.
Are his interviews popular?
Yeah. But he does so few that it's almost like hard to even judge. But but then he puts out this album. I'm saying he like embeds the interview question type shit in the album, so people have to listen to the album. It makes the album seem even more popular than it would be otherwise, you know.
Okay.
But rappers always do that. They always find somebody to beef with them when their album comes out.
Yeah, I just think
The Baby had nothing to say about Meg Thee Stallion until he dropped his album 2.5 years after she got shot, and then he just mentions he was fucking her the night before he got shot.
Yeah. Here's the thing about the Baby. That's a great example. He said something on stage about like gay people, and then like lost a bunch of partnerships. Lost his access to who's that singer? Dua Lipa.
Right.
Lost a lot. Right.
A lot.
I put my life savings. If I asked 99% of rappers their thoughts about gay folks and they were speaking unfiltered, they would share similar views, if not just as bad.
I feel like there's a big change in the fact that a lot of rappers really fundamentally don't have anything against gay people anymore. That maybe there was a time period where that was just kind of lip service that was being paid to the gay rights movement of just like, yeah, you gay, that's cool. Like, I don't care, whatever. But now I feel like it's actually like the norm for the average rapper to not. Now, I'm not talking about people within their exact culture, because for sure it's still the norm that like if somebody gets exposed as gay or whatever within like gangs, for example, it's not happening. They're out almost always. But I would say that like I really think that the rap community is getting a lot more open-minded in that regard. I don't think it's just shit they're saying on
I
camera.
think there's some open-mindedness to some degree. I think
but you're right. There's
once
definitely
you peel back the layers, you can ask them like, would you be fine with having a gay child?
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be.
Let's keep it. And let's be honest.
Yeah.
If you were in the public sphere as a political person, or if you were in the public sphere as some kind of artist or some kind of public figure, and you said, I'm not okay with having a gay child, you getting fucked up.
Rappers are like the last group that are kind of just given this grace to be real people. Maybe not the last, but like one of the last. Comedians, you could say, is the same thing. Where like, a rapper could smoke a blunt on camera and talk about how they were on a Percocet the other night and talk about how they fucked 10 girls or whatever. And that's not really even viewed as like all that out of the ordinary. And in almost every other walk of life, that's just like not happening. A rapper, a comedian, I was on Legion of Skanks and Louis J. Gomez is just sitting there taking dabs while he's fucking sitting there doing the podcast. There's not a lot of walks of life where that would really be allowed besides rap, comedy, and maybe some other stuff I'm not thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to be in a professional setting, I don't think you can do that. But I think if people found out you were doing drugs and you were like a lawyer, like most people would not care because a lot of lawyers do drugs. They don't really care that deeply.
But if it was exposed publicly, then it would become a big deal. If you get arrested for cocaine as a lawyer, that's a big deal. Whereas a bunch of lawyers doing cocaine, because it seems so unlikely that a white fucking lawyer or like a high class lawyer is going to get caught doing cocaine. It just doesn't really happen like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you know anything about these politicians, they all doing crazy sex parties and like DC.
Elon Musk, bro. Heard he was in a cuddle puddle.
Hey, man. Hey, listen, when you
done the cuddle puddle?
Yeah, no, I don't know about the cuddle puddle.
Oh, it's like a Silicon Valley type thing, like all these tech entrepreneurs or whatever. There'll be a party and like a bunch of guys, girls, whatever. They'll all just lay together and sort of have this like big kind of non-sexual cuddle. Bro. And I was thinking, like,
yeah, that's crazy. Imagine you just rub it up against a bra. Exactly. Then you feel some skin on your back, and it's a dude. Like, bro, no, we're not doing that. Yeah, that's crazy.
You're rubbing up on your girl. You look behind you. It's Mark Zuckerberg, and he's got you little spooned. But I was thinking,
you touch the skin, you realize the motherfucker's a cyborg. Bro.
The ratio of guys to girls would need to be so strong for me to want to take part, and then I still the whole time would be thinking like, my leg's not rubbing against some dude's bald head or anything, right?
You're not doing that. Cuddle puddle, bro.
But Elon Musk has taken part in this.
Cuddling that much to just be around random people. That's weird.
He does Molly and mushrooms and God knows what. I swear to God, I had a famous person tell me that straight up Elon Musk does hella coke.
Oh, yeah.
I can't say that, but a very, very famous, successful person told me that.
Listen, when they go to these parties, they get the best stuff. It's all vetted. There's no fentanyl overdoses randomly at these events. Like they take care of everything. And the women who are hired and paid to be there know what it is. Right? So they're all tested. And so everything is all pretty well set up. You go to a different room, somebody's fucking somebody else, everybody get dragged. Like these things are really well organized and vetted for this purpose. And so, do I believe he does? Yeah. Like, listen, I had my mind blown in a lot of ways when I learned about how like the sex industry worked with a lot of these rich people and how accessible it was.
Really?
When I was like talking to sex people who were like part of agencies, she was telling me like, yeah, like this person hires on the regular basis. They fly you out here, and then everything started to click. I was like, oh, that's why all these bitches got pictures in Dubai. I was like, well, y'all got so many countries in the Middle East. Why are all these motherfuckers going to Dubai all the time? Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's just like, you ain't making money like that from last I checked. Like, what's going on?
Right.
Like, you start to realize, it's like, oh, okay, that's why he's got that picture at that location, but his wife's never there. It's like, oh, okay, I understand. I'm starting to figure.
You don't remember Tag Your Sponsor? Tag Your Sponsor was like a blog that existed. This is a long time ago. This might be 2013, I think. And I'm sure it probably still exists in
It
some
still exists.
form.
You can go look up the blog post if you want pictures and screenshots.
So you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay,
we covered
good,
it a few times. You got fucking full-on conversations about dudes paying girls to suck off camels.
Shit. Yeah.
Taking 13-year-old boys' virginity. And it's not even fake. You want to know how I know it's not fake? Because they would have the photo ID of these women. Because like the people who were setting them up were essentially asking them for the photo IDs the women had already. Then the women would send in videos of them saying what they're going to do. So you had women, all kinds of crazy accents being like, I'm going to come and fuck your 13-year-old. And she got on camera, she sends it to him. Because like he wants to,
I'm going to fuck you.
You can watch it.
Yo,
you can watch
that's
this
so crazy.
That video, we covered that video.
Oh, I got to see this one. That's so funny.
she was gorgeous. Well, I mean, you know.
And that's the theater of it. Yeah. That's the fucked up part is this chick that if she walked by you on the street, you'd be melting. You'd be thinking, God, if I could only.
Yeah.
But
people got a price. You know, like, think about it. You go do one weekend, all expenses paid.
Yeah.
Tax-free, you getting 50, 60 grand. For one weekend. That's what motherfuckers do on a 6-month deployment.
I ain't eating camel shit for 60 grand or 600 grand.
Hey, listen.
That's just me.
Once you open up the depravity book, it just goes deeper and deeper. It rarely starts.
Shit can't be that bad.
Yeah,
it can't be that bad.
Yeah, listen. Once you open the book, it just incrementally expands.
But it's funny because the manosphere is so preoccupied with prostitution.
Oh
like,
yeah,
they claim to not take part for the most part, but it's also just like very much at the front of their consciousness. Even though I would estimate that probably like 90% of women have never even thought about selling pussy. Maybe I'm wrong. That might be an exaggeration, but the vast majority, I would say, this is not even a prospect. This is not a consideration.
The grift in that community expands and changes every time because it went from pickup artistry stuff before to like, all right, now we're going to rebrand how to be confident and figure it out, to now it's like espousing mostly like conservative talking points and then being adjacent to that whilst also living a lifestyle that's incredibly hedonistic. And so none of it's very coherent. You know, if you think about it, like there is no place for a lot of this red pill talk in religious circles, yet they tie themselves to the Islam, for example, so they can have their 20 wives, and they always bring that up. Like, I really identify with Islam because, like, I feel like it's just like the values that most align with me, and then 10 wives. I'm like, bro, is that what you think?
Culturally, they identify with it. They see it as like, I'm that kind of guy.
They don't. They don't even identify with it culturally. They think they do,
right?
But they don't. They're not subscribing to the 5 prayers a day.
Right.
They're not thinking about taking a pilgrimage to Hajj.
Yeah.
Right. They're not even thinking about the tenets of being a Muslim. They're not thinking about none of that. So even the culture of what Islam actually is, the whole Dubai thing of driving the fastest cars and riding fucking motorcycles upside down and spanking camels, all that, like that's not what Islam is, right? So when you're talking about,
that's amazing that people think that.
No, but they do though, because that's a perception of it. If you actually ask them deeply, like, what is it about?
Right.
Oh, I just think it's so good that 10 wives and like the bitch does what you tell her to do.
But that's amazing to just go with the religion because it's the most beneficial to you. Like Islam kind of has the best misogynistic branding maybe, and so therefore I'm going with it. And it's just like, that's hilarious to pick it about that rather than like what it claims to say about the nature of the universe. Because I had a clip from my interview with Sneeko that got clipped by a bunch of different Christian people because basically, like, we were talking about religion, and I'm not making much of a secret of it that I consider Sneeko to be basically like a very surface level religious person. He just doesn't seem to have gone out of his way to have like learned anything about Christianity or whatever the fuck he says he's into. And to me, that's just kind of absurd because what I said was that if I believed that God was real, to me, it would seem like demanding of a massive amount of my time to try to understand this and to put it into perspective and to figure out exactly what God wants of me and everything like that. I spend no mental energy on that because I don't believe in God. But if I did believe in God, that would be beyond fascinating to me. And and Sneeko just straight up is like, Nah, that sounds like a waste of time. And a lot of Christian people love that because they're just like, look at this atheist who's so right about this topic. Now, he doesn't believe in God, so that's bad, but he's right about everything else. Like, you should be this fascinated by this higher power.
I think faith is beautiful, but it's demanding. It's work. It's effort. It's a commitment. You know, like when people go to church every Sunday, like, just think about this. What's one thing you can name in your life that you've attended every single week with others for the last 30 years?
Absolutely nothing, yeah.
There's people who do it for 70, 80, 60 years of their entire life. Every single Sunday, they come in with their community. They all share in on faith. They all listen to a sermon of sorts. Maybe it's a different person who's doing it at different times. They've watched people go through baptisms. They've watched people make confessions, or like not necessarily been in on for confession, but they've been part of this community that's kind of just built its own on some time. Like, there is something beautiful about investing in yourself to try to live by a set of code of values that aren't easy. Because what faith does, a religion does, even like I'm not religious, I can appreciate it from the outside now as a grown person who's not being forced upon, you know?
Right.
It's like it gives you this framework. And adhering to it is not easy because it requires discipline, right? It requires you to understand what these sins are, why they're bad for your life as well, right? The reason why they're telling you not to fuck around all the time isn't just because they don't want you to have fun. There's risks with you have kids out of wedlock, which, you know, I mean, all of a sudden there you have like children in difficult situations, potential for diseases, potential for heartbreak and stuff like that. Like, these are compounding things that are very difficult. So when they say it's a sin, they're understanding, like, generally speaking, doing this is going to be bad for you. And adhering to that idea of like, I will not sleep around till marriage, or I will try to do my best to not indulge in this as much as possible. It takes work. So when I hear these guys talk about faith all the time and, oh, this religion, so they only talk about the stuff that's self-serving to them, not realizing that faith is about sacrifice. It's not about benefits.
Right.
Right? So it's a complete flipped around idea of how you should approach faith in general. And they use it as a vehicle to draw in more viewers and to make it more appealing, when in reality, it's a grift.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you look at the 10 Commandments, this is a very early attempt at man basically trying to lay down some rules and say, here are some things that if you want to live a good life, you should avoid. It's all just a bunch of self-control shit. It's all a bunch of shit that if we weren't societally conditioned to not do it, we would do it. If it was not illegal and societally looked down upon to kill someone, probably we would have both killed someone in our life because they looked at us wrong or fucking pushed us, or, you know, some fight that we got into that ended up becoming nothing would have been a murder because of the fact that society has created all these rules to, you know, avoid these consequences. And yeah, I mean, like, 10 Commandments, don't cheat on your fucking wife, basically, is like, you know, I'm sure, you know, that's understandable how prehistoric people, not prehistoric literally, but like people thousands of years ago needed some kind of guide to like understand the rules, to try to start to lay down some kind of framework. And to 2,000 years later, to think that the best way to live your life is to basically just like take some shit that some people thought of when they were living on the farm and they had almost no understanding of the world, and to think that there's some great insight there into how to live your life. I mean, it's fascinating, but it's like there's much more coherent thoughts out there about what the good life is.
I don't disagree. I think the framework still works pretty well, even in a modern day society, because I think the core tenets of it being like, you know, be charitable to your neighbor, you know, understanding that you have to be kind to others, or that you are engaging in this unity with this woman, that there is a certain amount of faithfulness that's demanded and that's expected of you. All these things still ring very true today in terms of how they're important, even in a modern society. I don't disagree that it's not the perfect framework, which is why I think they've updated at different points, or they've made certain small changes. But, you know, even the whole like no pork thing, the no pork thing in a lot of religions sounds stupid, but you can imagine in those times, pork was probably a very difficult meat to eat without diseases being, you know, fomented afterwards in a lot of the people who ate it. And so they put this rule in to protect people. Do we need it as much today? Absolutely not. So that's probably something you can do it because, like, who cares? At the end of the day, if it's meat's fine. But originally, why was it created as deception is very understandable. They were just trying to protect folks. I'm sure if sugar and cigarettes existed then, they probably put those as the 11th and 12th commandment. Thou shalt not eat sugar, thou shalt not smoke cigarettes, right? Because those things are killing folks.
Well, but if the 10 Commandments were coming from some sort of divine wisdom, then you could imagine that stuff like that would have been included.
because they would have known that shit existed.
Because it would have been like, you know, they would have understood things that people didn't already understand at that time.
Crazy.
In reality, it took thousands of years for people to figure out that, like, oh, smoking can kill you.
Nah, imagine in 15 AD, they're like, guys, thou shalt not use your cell phone too much. Like, they would have been confused as what
Put the
fuck
Marlboros
is a cell
down,
phone, bro?
boys.
Nah. They couldn't have done that at the time. But I get what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
All this to say, like, I've grown to like appreciate religion in a lot of ways on the outside, even though I'm not religious myself.
I agree with that too. And a lot of people think I'm this like full-blown religious hater. I respect and appreciate the role that it seems to play in a lot of people's lives, where they find comfort in it and it gives them a structure and everything like that. I don't agree with whether it's real or not, whether it's like founded in reality, but I think for the vast majority of people, religion is probably a positive thing in their life.
Yeah. As you get older, man, community becomes a harder thing to find. And I think without a religious community, that's like super difficult.
Yeah.
Faith brings a lot of people together, and I think that's like part of the human experience, and folks are lacking in that. And folks are super lonely right now.
I think that's the biggest problem in society probably, is that stuff like all our institutions are just fading away, like the church, and that there hasn't been something good to come about to replace it aside from
TikTok.
like what? Yeah, consumerism, you know, going to Abercrombie.
Fucking TikTok, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I'm not going to shit on the whole app itself, but if you think about it, like that's how people are connecting with others. That's what people spend most of their day on now. It's like that's a wild thing to imagine. It's not with people; it's watching other people live and dance, I guess, and do some silly shit. So yeah, I think people are really lacking. So yeah.
So something that I want to put in the title: Andrew Tate. How do you feel about the latest scandal, which I find very fascinating? True Geordie is basically canceled off the fucking internet. He has Twitch suspended. He got fired from damn near every sponsor because he made a off-color joke, I guess you could say, about Andrew Tate and his newfound Muslim nature beliefs.
Yeah.
He
said the whole blowing up thing?
Yeah, he said something about like, you know, go blow yourself up or whatever if you're so Muslim. It's a pretty offensive statement. It is kind of odd to see someone getting canceled for saying something Islamophobic about somebody who apparently has only been Muslim for like a couple weeks.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's pretty interesting, especially in light of the I wonder if the Kanye and Kyrie thing kind of amplified the likelihood of that happening.
Or like just people reacting to religious stuff that way?
Or just we're seeing all these people get destroyed for, you know, having the nerve to say something about the Jews. I mean,
You want to know what the
Muslims aren't going to sit around and let that go down without getting theirs as well, right? True Geordie, sorry, you're done.
You want to know what the real take is on this? Man, Christians must be mad because you can say anything about Jesus and nobody gives a fuck.
Yeah, we haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah. You could say whatever. You call pastors this. You could say this. You could make any stereotype about diddling kids, or you can say whatever you want.
Well, it's the same way where you could tweet, I hate white people, and you can't tweet, I hate black people.
Hey, Christians, it's time for y'all to get a little upset.
You know, it's like
time for you guys to get your reparations.
Even though he's like apparently from Egypt and whatnot, or, you know, somewhere in the Middle East, probably not white. He still gets treated like the white religious figure, where you can kind of dump on Jesus a little bit. Nobody gave a shit when Jesus was on South Park like a million fucking times.
But if you draw the prophet, you get murked.
You still can't see those episodes of South Park, I heard. I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but I heard that those ones are banned from streaming services and stuff.
You can find it on Pornhub.
You can? Seriously?
No.
No, that would be a good place to put it, yeah.
Pornhub, South Park.
I mean, I'm sure it's on the Pirate Bay no matter what.
Yeah, you can find it somewhere.
But, I mean, it's an interesting double standard. Yeah, Jesus really does get kind of the shit end of the stick.
It's pounded on all the time.
Yeah.
And I have no dog in the fight. I really don't care.
Right.
Personally, I think you should be able to make fun of all of it. But I also know that when it comes to religion, folks get very touchy-feely about stuff. And understandably, it's very intimate. It's someone they feel like they're very close to. It's like close to their heart. And so I understand a lot of like the tension around it.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that True Geordie's joke, which admittedly I'm not even sure I actually saw the clip, I just read the quote.
Yeah.
Do you think that is enough? Like, do you want to live in a world in which a guy who says something like that loses all of his sponsors? Does that seem like a fair outcome to you?
No, but that's because I keep the same energy in regards to like trans issues, faith-related issues. Like I don't feel like someone making a joke about your faith would necessitate this kind of response. And I hate the fact that media has pushed to the point where these companies are all reacting this way. Yeah, so I don't think so, no.
Right.
No. I think there's rights for people to feel upset. I feel like this fight's right. You know, people want to come at him for it. I'm not got no issue with it. But like the whole losing his sponsors, getting banned off of everything. It's like, bruv, how many people have sat on Twitch and made all kinds of jokes about Christians and Jesus and not have their account banned? Right?
Well, it's interesting
because and then I think it's just the media uproar made them feel pressured to do something.
If I'm not mistaken, He did not say this on Twitch. So he got banned off Twitch for something he said off platform.
That shit don't matter no more.
Yeah, because Twitch is the by far wokest platform that will ban you for something that you said off platform, apparently, which is really interesting because nobody's getting their Twitter banned for something that they said on YouTube.
Yeah. Twitch is run by idiots. That's why.
They're the purple-haired lunatics in the bunch.
Absolutely. All the negative stereotypes you can imagine, that's the Twitter staff.
Sneeko, I think, managed to stream for like 10 minutes and then they banned him right away. And I doubt he really said anything too offensive during that time period. It was just kind of like, nah, get the fuck out. That's like you're walking in with a MAGA hat into the gay club. They're just, nah, get the hell out of here.
That was so easy. And he knew he wasn't going to last long there because at the end of the day, it didn't matter. Once they saw what he'd done on YouTube and some of the stuff he was guilty of, and all these social media companies, they all know each other. They have they know people who run like the management people at the other spot, or even like content creation. So sometimes they have to coordinate things. And so when it comes to these
that's
bands,
the Illuminati.
They're conversations.
If you know all the mods, all the people who have power at all these fucking social media companies, that's a superpower that none of us could understand. Because we all know people who have who can get accounts back on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Those are fucking people that everybody's got to suck up to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you really know employees in there, I mean, that's pretty. It's important.
Yeah. So on the Tate stuff and the whole Muslim thing, I think what I just took away from it is just as an overreaction, and I think we're going to see more and more of this in the future. Everyone's fucking terrified.
It's interesting with True Geordie because his last scandal was him texting somebody telling him he wanted to eat their shit. I don't know if you missed that.
I definitely missed that. I actually like Geordie. At least I like his stuff.
But he said that it was just talk. That it's like a little fetish thing he's got. Is that you might be talking to somebody and you keep upping the ante and all of a sudden you're like, I want to cut you open and drink your blood. I want to eat your shit out of your ass. I don't know. Personally, never even came close to that. But that it seemed like people kind of let him skate with that excuse.
I don't know if you ever memed that. This I think is a quote from a movie, but I remember I texted a girl one time. I said, "I want to wear your skin like a lampshade." You remember that one?
Yeah.
Where's that from?
Well, but that's a classic.
That's a classic.
I would crawl through a million miles of desert just to hear you fart or some shit. Just say that. Yeah.
I just want you to get up out of your seat so I can sniff that shit. You say weird stuff, and so I can imagine, in the vein of humor. I would have to look at the context of the conversation.
I used to say, she's so hot I would drink her diarrhea, like a lot, to the point where me and my friends would call a girl shit eating hot, and we would all know what it meant, which is you would eat her shit. Yeah. Not actually, but
we just exaggerate. Hyperbolic. I don't think we'd actually do it.
Yeah, but so I mean, okay, so True Geordie getting canceled for this seems like I'm sure it'll be all right. He'll still hold on to whatever percentage of fan base because kind of my metric for somebody being canceled is you have to lose a lot of followers. That's when I start to feel like you might really be canceled. No, obviously there's corporate canceled where you stop being able. Kanye's not losing any followers, but he's corporate canceled because they're not going to book him at venues. He's not going to be able to work with record labels presumably for some time. Fashion brands won't work with him. That's one level of canceling. But when you're a YouTuber, when James Charles lost 1.5 million subscribers in a day or whatever it was and set the record, that's when it starts to feel a little different. When the fans actually are mad enough at you that they leave in large numbers, that's when I start to be a little bit more convinced that it's real.
Okay. I don't even think that shit's that real because it's just a knock.
Yeah.
It's just a knock.
Sometimes.
It's a slowdown. When you get removed from the platforms, it's a wrap. That's when it ends most of the time.
A lot of truth to that.
Once you lose you're always you would say whatever you want, talk that good talk. All right, well, hey man, go enjoy that platform. Good luck, brother.
Right.
Because you gonna feel it. You gonna feel the difference. Your audience is not gonna follow you. They're not as loyal as you think they are, and you gonna definitely feel that difference in terms of your media attention. James Charles is uploading regularly. Yeah. Is he getting way less views? Absolutely. Man's still making millions. Yeah. He don't really. He's still living.
But I think he has a different level of engagement with his audience in the sense that he's talking about dropping a new makeup line, and the makeup from what I understand watching some tea videos about it and stuff, it seems like the appetite for it is pretty small. Whereas before he had a huge brand partnership with a big makeup company and it's this whole big thing. And it's it's a big difference between watching James Charles's YouTube video and liking James Charles so much that you're going to buy his makeup. I feel like those are two very, very different levels of fandom. And what I'll say is that Steve Will Do It apparently has such a strong fan base that I think his Rumble video has a couple million views or whatever. So if
do you believe those numbers on Rumble?
I'm inclined to be suspicious, but I also believe that Steve Will Do It could get a couple million people from his Instagram to Rumble to watch a video, given that he's been banned from YouTube. For sure, I believe that. I don't know what it's at right now.
I think he could do that on an offshoot to try to draw in some attention. I don't think it's going to last. I don't think it's going to last. I just don't think that platform is going to win.
If he keeps going hard on all his other platforms and then the destination is Rumble to watch his full-length videos, I think it could become very significant for him. And I think that if you take a lot of other people, and if you have Andrew Tate consistently dropping on there, if you have all these other people, I definitely could see Rumble becoming a threat, or one of these platforms if they really go for it, you know?
And unless these platforms develop some kind of subscription-based service, there's no way. And the reason why
they say that they make good ad money. Now, I'm not saying I believe it, but they're saying
they got to fluff up all the numbers to make things look good. I think at the end of the day, if you look at the payouts that these creators are actually getting on Rumble, it's non-existent, except for the big ones. The big ones who've signed agreements. So I'm sure Tate probably got a good agreement, a good deal.
Right.
His name is big. He goes on there. He's also very smart in regards to like getting media attention through interviews that he's doing still that are being published on YouTube.
Right.
So he still stays in the YouTube space in people's mind. And so people want to see more of him. They go back there. Right. And so Tate has found a way to kind of circumvent the ban and still get a lot of attention on himself, which, you know, that part is genius in regards to like taking on Piers Morgan or all these other podcasters and doing all these interviews. You notice he wasn't doing them nearly as much before. Now he has to do them because the only way to convert the audience is to do that stuff or to convert to Islam or to do whatever.
But
right?
it's interesting. You can get banned off the platform and then just keep going on the platform on other people's shows, because Alex Jones does it all the time. You know, like all these fucking like.
I'm glad. Honestly.
Anyone could do it. Yeah.
You can't do that on Twitch.
Yeah, I know.
I'm glad they can do it on YouTube.
God,
I think it's unfortunate that someone gets, and I don't want YouTube to adopt that policy. I would feel very like bummed out if they stop.
Because then Twitch becomes this weird. It's a weird paranoid environment where like at TwitchCon, you can't even like get somebody in the frame who's banned off Twitch if while you're streaming at a Twitch event or whatever. So it becomes this kind of like thing where you could like pop up and surprise somebody. Boom, you're banned. I'm in your video. Yeah. It's weird. But how do you feel about us sitting down and having a conversation with Nick Fuentes? And do you think that it's productive for people like Destiny or I to have conversations with people who are kind of white nationalists?
I'm of the mindset that folks should talk to whoever they want to talk to. I think if the topic is serious, then approach it with a serious amount of preparation. That's the only thing. So I don't think there's an issue with speaking with him. But if he's going to come on and say a bunch of wild stuff, you got to be able to know the material and you got to be able to rebut it to some degree. Or if you don't feel comfortable with it, then understand what it is, who you're bringing on. You know what I'm trying to say? Someone's going to come to me and say, I want to have a full-length conversation with you about how Israel's the greatest nation on earth and they're doing nothing wrong. I'm like, I'm not mad at that, but you at least have to have some of the Palestinian narrative in there, or else it just sounds like you shilling. You know what I'm saying?
I felt like, you know, when I see Destiny doing it, I don't have any qualms with him doing it at all, because he's so like ready to take on whatever his ideas are. With me, it felt kind of futile, because it's like, I'm just talking to somebody where this is their whole wheelhouse. Like they've spent their whole fucking life preparing to have this conversation with simpletons like me who don't know anything about race realism, right? So it just felt like kind of useless in the sense of like, you know, getting a million comments about how likable he is and everything. And I can't even deny it. Yeah, he's kind of a likable guy, even though he's got some ideas I don't agree with. But it feels kind of like
saying that or not.
Yeah, right. I know.
I'm crazy.
But it's like, you know, it's kind of weird. Like, damn, okay, did I just do my part to sort of like make being racist seem chill to people?
Yeah,
you know?
Probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And I had a couple black guys with me, and one of them was sucking his dick, and the other one, AD did what he could, but it wasn't, you know. None of us were ready to really take him on, you know.
That was my chief issue. Like, I remember when Sneeko did it the first time, I'm like, yo, get this on, because I don't know what the fuck. I was there with Jidon, and we were just chatting, and all of a sudden, this dude's out here talking about, well, listen, the reason why black people have lower IQ, I was like, bro, what the fuck is this dude talking about? I've never even read up on any of this literature, but I'm not going to sit here and get emotional and start screaming at him, because then you look stupid. So I was like, this, you could take the conversation, and then it went from there, and then he did a good job of like combating that research, because I was not familiar, nor did I really want to be interested in it.
It's such a technical conversation once you start to really get into it.
Absolutely.
Because from what I've gathered, there isn't really much disagreement about the fact that there are discrepancies in IQ between races. What's up for debate is why that is the case, and if IQ is even a good way of measuring intelligence in general, which is, you know, again, very much not a conversation that is worth having aside from the data and the facts.
But think about how it looks optically as well. Right? Like, okay, you're a white man.
If I made this my thing.
Hey, I'll be honest, like, you're a white man. You know what I mean, you got two black dudes sitting here.
Yeah.
You brought this white dude who's like part of this party, and then he's just telling like, well, listen, black people, the reason why you guys have Laura, it looks crazy. It looks wild. And that's like one of my chief issues with Sneeko one time is like, I'd had a conversation. I'm like, listen, you can have conversation with whoever you want. Just don't bring them on when I'm on because I don't really want to have these conversations. And I look crazy because I can't refute any, so I look stupid.
Right.
And like 15 minutes later, this motherfucker brings him on. I'm like, you retard. So I don't think people shouldn't have this conversation. I think he should have a space to be able to talk about it. But if he's going to be talking about these like really edge kind of topics and he's having debates, it can't be just in front of folks who don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, because I felt kind of dumb because it's like my things that I brought up, he did such a good job dismantling them because I'm like, oh, what about this clip of you, comparing? He said that a white woman having sex with a dog would be on a similar level of degeneracy to a white woman having sex with a black man. Super fucked up statement. But, he makes the argument of like, bro, I was 18 and it was like leaked audio or something. It's like he has everything on deck to be able to contextualize every bad thing he ever said to make it sound not that bad.
Yeah.
And then it ultimately, like, everything that I brought up that I had written down from looking at the Southern Poverty Law Center website was basically just like frivolous. It's not like, they're not like in-depth critiques of his worldview. They're just like sound bites of like, oh, look at this one offensive thing you said. AD's like, you said that black people don't jog. And I immediately knew what he meant because it was like previously Nick had a conversation about Ahmaud Arbery and how he wasn't really jogging in that neighborhood and he was actually there to steal or whatever the fuck. And it was like, it's a soundbite. Yeah. It's like, and I didn't do any better. Like we just didn't really like bring any gas to the fire.
I think you don't want to operate on gotchas. You don't want to be like, I'm going to get you with this. And I think it is good when people are well researched on their topics, even if it's stuff that you think is abhorrent or whatever. I think there should be a space where people can discuss these difficult topics and then be in depth about it, but it has to be across from people who know what they're talking about. And I understand what you were trying to do, what you were trying to represent the other side and be able to get that and like, oh, I got you on this. But it's a poor way to have a conversation with somebody who's extremely well read on any topic.
Right, because, and that's the thing about Nick Fuentes, he's so canceled that it's like, it's kind of hard to like find like a good critique of him or like, to even find too much documentation about like his career or whatever.
It's not that hard. You just have to know what it is that you're looking for when it's discussion. If he's having a long form 2-hour discussion in regards to like Russia and Crimea or whatever, he's probably got a lot of historical facts
I have no business wading into that.
But exactly. So if you don't know it, then you just don't talk about it. That's why I wouldn't sit across from a bunch of people to have conversations. I'm like, this is not my wheelhouse. I'm not gonna just sit here and like just have a whole rant in front of my audience and then I look crazy just standing there like, yeah, sure, brother.
Yeah.
So
but it's like like if I were to give somebody advice on how to be a content creator, a big part of the advice is basically to take strong stances. You need to have an opinion.
Yeah.
New album comes out. If you want to talk about rap, you better not get on camera and say, yeah, shit was cool. It was cool. It was dope. I liked it. No. You got to have something to say. You got to feel something.
Speed going wild all the time. I should Speed. Shout out to him. Great job becoming the biggest YouTuber in regards to live streaming. That's amazing. But you know what I mean? People like those extreme reactions. So that's good.
But then for us, it's like I also feel like there's an important thing where if you want to be taken serious intellectually, you have to be willing to admit what you're not really educated about and what you don't deserve to really have a strong perspective on and stuff like that. It takes a lot of courage as a content creator to be like, listen, like this is just not my wheelhouse, so I'm kind of defer to other people but that it makes your perspective a lot less useless on there. But there also is a market. There's a lot of dummies out there who are like famous right-wing commentators and like famous left-wing commentators too. Look at the fucking Young Turks. It's like they're just like giving like boneheaded versions of that side's tribalism. Yeah. And that appeals to some people, Destiny's very like complicated. It's like very, very in depth. I understand.
You became a big fan, huh?
I am, but I just also understand why he's probably not like getting invited on CNN all the time. Yeah, he's just like his platform is a little too nuanced for the average person, whereas like people like Dave Rubin.
Don't bring up these names; they make me cringe so hard. I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you two questions. You would say that your platform grew exponentially as a result of like covering hip hop, right?
Yeah,
and so. A lot of people wonder, but do you feel like you have any obligation or to give back towards that community? And if you have, how have you done so? And if you haven't, why?
I wouldn't say I necessarily feel like an obligation to give back to any particular community because really it's like my channel has grown off of interviewing a million different types of people from a million different walks of life, you know? And it's like my biggest interview ever was a kid from South Florida. And, you know, one of my biggest interviews ever was King Von from Chicago. And one of the biggest videos we ever did was with Stupid Young in Long Beach. So no, I wouldn't say that it is an aspiration of mine in the long run to like get better with our philanthropy and have it be less sporadic, you know, because we'll just do like pop-up events or vlogs or whatever where we kind of like give back or whatever. We did a video where we gave out 100 grand in O Block in Chicago. And we've done some other stuff locally or whatever, but it's not like, you know, consistent. And that's something I would like to kind of make part of the brand. But it's also like you want to do it in a way that is an efficient use of your resources, which is kind of like part of my issue with a lot of the YouTubers who do the charity type content is that it's just like they're doing things that don't scale, that don't have any sort of systematic impact, that aren't really going to like change life for these people in the long run. So it's like maybe I'm kind of like hung up on that, is that like if I'm going to do more charity type stuff with the channel, that it's like I want to do it in a way that's, I don't know, just like that really makes sense in the long run.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that criticism brought to you?
Not like the financial part of it specifically, where people aren't like, oh, you like should be literally giving money back. I mean, maybe like a little bit, but
not money
like,
back, but like just in general. Do you feel like people have been saying that?
Well, I mean, the criticism typically is much more like you just shouldn't be covering this in general. Yeah. Not like you shouldn't be, like you should be sharing the profits from what you're doing. Yeah. A lot of people don't seem like they've thought it through that far. Yeah. It's more or less like you shouldn't be doing this in general, or you just, whatever you're doing is just deeply offensive for some vague reason. It's
because
like,
you're a white man?
Yeah. Or like, you know, yeah, it's usually just like very vague. That's one thing I hate about rap is it's just like the arguments people get into are just like so poorly sourced most of the time. It's just like, I just want to have like good arguments, and a lot of times like the attempt to say that somebody's a piece of shit is just, the case being put out there is just not something I would expect.
So the optics look weird because on one hand you'll have like DJ Academics come on and basically be at the center of a lot of the stuff that's happening in these areas with the thing in Chirac City, whatever the series he was running, and like it encourages, or you know, maybe contributes to some degree to some of those issues that they're having between each other. And then on the same hand, when you're having these interviews with people and you're going through these process and they're talking about this stuff that maybe gets them in trouble or maybe doesn't, people feel probably distinctly different about it with you because of the fact that you're white. And I think when it comes to hip hop, there's always been that contention in regards to race that's always kind of been there, even though it's not always necessarily justified. I think that's always been part of hip hop. Right. And so, yeah, seeing like you have the platform and you're bringing these folks on and it's causing issues for the folks that are coming on sometimes, I understand where the mindset comes from optically. Do you understand where it comes from optically or no?
Oh, yeah, totally. But it's an interesting thing about it is I would say that Academics almost gets the same treatment as me in a lot of ways. Now, there's differences because he's black and I'm white. But he's an immigrant. He's from Jamaica, and then he moves to Jersey, and he ends up going to college. He goes to a good college and everything before he ends up starting his YouTube channel, right? And he's not from the hood. He's not from, you know, like Chicago or anything like that. So to a lot of people, me being white and from the suburbs objectively, and like his upbringing is almost like, it almost doesn't matter. Like we're both culture vultures. Yeah. Vlad, same thing. Vlad was like Vlad's from the Bay, is like putting out like hip hop mixtapes for like 20 fucking years or whatever. Like his hip hop roots go so deep of him DJing parties in the Bay and shit like that. And when he tells you these stories from back in the day, you're like, wow, like you have a fucking pedigree, dude. Like you've really earned your spot being like the biggest rap interviewer. But then like the criticism of him will just be like, you're a culture vulture. It's just like dumb.
Yeah. Do you think any of the interviews ever go too far? Do you ever think that there is a point where it becomes unethical?
A little bit, yeah, sometimes. I mean, not. I don't know if I would say it about myself so much because I feel like I can usually justify pretty much everything I ask, you know? But I understand from some people's perspective, they don't understand how callous I could be, or like how normal a lot of this shit seems to both me and the people that I'm interviewing quite often. And so I think a lot of times like the optics of just are like, oh, you don't care about death. Yeah. And to me, it's like, no, I care deeply about this shit. It's just like, it is kind of normal to us at this point. And I understand that doesn't make sense to a lot of people.
Yeah. What's that like when you interview somebody and they die shortly after, or they die sometime after?
Like I said, I'm extremely numb to it. Like Aaron Carter died, a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And, it's sad, but I can't say I didn't see it coming. And yeah, I mean, it's just like, I've seen it happen over and over and over to the extent where, people I interview, people that are just around, it'll be, I interview some dude and his homie's sitting on the couch and we say 5 words to each other and then a week later the guy gets killed. And it's just like, I don't know. Like in cases like that, it's like how much mental energy do you end up really putting into it? How much do you really think about it when it's happening that frequently? And you meet and so many people that it's like, I mean, I know all these fucking rappers' entourages, and half the time it's like somebody will get killed and I'll realize I was around him 10 times because they were with this other guy that I was kicking it with, and I probably never even like bothered to learn their name.
Right.
And then like all of a sudden people are doing the candlelight vigil and I'm looking at it on Instagram just like, holy fuck, like like what is this place I've gotten to where this is so fucking ordinary to us?
Yeah, that is wild. With the Aaron Carter, you did an interview just a short while before?
I did the interview. It came out 3 days before he died, and I think I maybe did it a week before that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you said that one you kind of saw it coming?
Oh, yeah. He's like super fucked up in the interview. He's like slurring his speech. He's like just visibly like less put together than every other time I had ever interviewed him. And I might have interviewed him like 5 times before that or some shit. So, it was kind of like a different person every time where he would be at a different level of fucked upness / like mental health episode. And then this most recent time, though, yeah, it was a mess. Didn't seem good. People said his girl broke up with him like right after. Like
the interview?
Yeah, like within the next day or two. Like it would have been a totally different interview if I did it like 2 or 3 days later, because then he would have been talking about his girl in past tense.
Yeah.
Whereas they were like kind of holding it together at that moment. So yeah, everything about it was kind of a disaster, but ended up just like taking on this weird historical significance because it's just like his last communication with the public,
Yeah. That is wild. I don't know if I'd ever get used to that, like having a full-on interview with somebody and they die a couple of days later. Obviously, you're not tied to these people. That's a weird thing, because people will see us on a camera, and they're like, oh, these guys are friends. And I'm like, no, that's really not the case. And I think you probably say the same for everyone you interviewed. You don't feel that kind of closeness or proximity. There might be a few here and there.
Right.
For the vast majority, I don't think you feel a sort of friendship or kinship with them.
I feel a connection to them where I definitely like care about them and everything. But with the Aaron Carter thing in particular, people are like, oh, why didn't you do something to help him? Like, what the fuck am I going to do? Like he's fucked up on drugs. He's been fucked up like half his life. Like this is not something where, it's not my business. It's not like anything I would have done would have been effective. Like what the fuck am I going to do? I'm going to throw you in rehab. Like there's a million people in your life who are so much closer to you than me. It's like, I have like a different type of relationship with somebody like him where it's like, we just do these interviews periodically, and there's no communication between us, essentially, in between it.
Yeah.
And it's like this weird it's like a friendship, but it's just these little dots on the timeline, and there's nothing in between.
Right.
Of like us getting to know each other, talking about what's going on in life, everything. And it's the thing that's kind of like weird about the Aaron Carter thing is just that it happened. You got to see me being like frustrated and annoyed with him a couple days before he died.
Right.
Because it's like, he
was high.
Yeah, and I just like, yeah, you're annoying. Like you're bothered. Like you're not giving me a good interview. You showed up to do this in like not a great state, and your dog's falling all over the couch and shit. And it's like, it's kind of like gross for people to see that I was just kind of like, fed up with it.
Yeah, I mean the timing, the optics look crazy. Like you just out here being like this motherfucker, and then he's dead. Because they're going backwards.
Yeah.
You're doing it from there. They're going backwards. Like they know he's dead. Then they watch the interview. Like, how could you do that? He's fucking dead.
But I can't believe that they would even think that that there was any other option, because it's like he hit me up to do the interview. He's acting like his shit is all good.
Yeah.
And then he shows up and it's not all good. So it's like he's kind of lying to me. Like I wouldn't have really agreed to do it if I thought that he was gonna, because me and Vlad both said the same thing, which is that we both had interviewed him multiple times and stopped around a year ago, or like a little bit longer maybe than a year ago. And we both had like the same feeling, which is like, he's charming, he's fun, I like him, but it's just getting to be too much. He's just like, I kind of feel uncomfortable with where you seem to be at in your life. And, you know, platforming somebody one time who's not at a great place in their life is one thing, but when you consistently do it, it starts to feel like this is, you know, not good. And so, yeah, it was just like, we were watching it unfold so slowly that it's just like I saw it happening. It's like a car accident in slow motion with him, because it just, I could have told you probably. Like if you told me that this is how it ended 3 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, that sounds about right.
See, it's so weird that you would call someone like that a friend to me.
Well, friend is a stretch.
Okay.
It's like a podcast friend. It's a different type of friendship when you just are having these conversations so far apart and they're all public and there's very little communication off camera.
Yeah, I think that speaks to it. I would never call someone like that a friend, and I think it's important.
Well,
because
I wouldn't really say that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's got to be a different word
for it. It's a big deal because I think for the people watching, they assume that we have some strong ties to the people that we're on camera with all the time, or that we feel a very close proximity, and it's not the case at all. So the public can't understand some of our actions in that regards. But it's like, this is a work thing. Like, yeah, we enjoy the conversation. There might be laughs, there might be jokes, but at the end of the day, you go on your family, and if we're not doing an interview, we might not talk for multiple years. You get what I'm saying? That's normal, and you wouldn't even feel any type of way. I think the people I call friends, if I found out they'd OD'd after an interview, I'd be really devastated. I'd be really hurt by the fact, right? And I'm pretty sure for you too. If one of your co-hosts, something happened to them, I think you feel drastically different.
Well, I'm gonna be real with you. If you died, I would feel way different than Aaron Carter dying, because I wouldn't have seen it coming. Because you seem like you have everything pretty under control in your life and everything. And it's just like, it would seem so much more sad. Whereas with Aaron Carter, when you see somebody who's that into their addiction,
you've already been getting ready.
Yeah, you've already kind of had to like accommodate for this in your brain. Like, okay, this is quite likely to happen. But yeah, I mean, and I have a guilt trip about, or I have a like guilt complex about that, because I meet so many amazing people doing these podcasts. And then I just like don't really like stay in touch with them on a human level. Yeah. Like, I think you're a great guy. Like a really great guy that, dude, if you were my neighbor, I bet that we would hang out all the time. You know, like fucking, hey, you want to watch this fucking podcast or something? You want to, I don't know, like whatever. Like, but somehow like the distance and shit, just like, it just doesn't really like, you know, and it's like I'm having conversations with different people every week. I got a family. I got so many people in my life. I got all these fucking employees who basically feel like friends. It's just like, I just don't make the effort to like really stay in touch with people. But one thing that I see with really successful people is that they do that they fucking are all about their relationships, and they just are like they go out of their way to go to people's parties and social events to stay in touch with people and stuff. Those are people who really appreciate it, and I don't feel like I appreciate it enough sometimes.
That's work.
Yes.
That's not the same. They're not going to fucking Jimmy, who lives out on 7th Street at a regular home. They're going out to Ryan Gosling's place because they've heard that this agent's going to be there, or they know the most important people, so they got to be present.
There's performative socializing, or like performative friendship, and then there's actual friendship. So like I suck at both. Okay. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah. I think it's impossible to have this many people that you meet on a regular basis and to have strong bonds. Yeah, everyone got to be selective to some degree. Yeah. But I think the ones that you do choose are worth investing in, absolutely.
I seen something that said that like the average person is only able to remember like 150 names or 150 people or something. I'm like, what the fuck? I have so many thousands of people crammed into my brain, and I will feel so guilty when I was at the fucking porn clinic getting tested the other day, and I see a girl, and I fucking know, I still can't remember her name, but I know her. I've talked to her. I don't know if I interviewed her or not.
Hilarious. Like, I know where I fucked her. But
no, that happens too, for sure. Yeah, and I don't remember her name, and like, it's a weird feeling.
Inside of you. What's her name again?
But at the same time, when you fucked like 500 fucking girls on camera or whatever, it's like that is pretty reasonable, right? That you're not going to remember all their names.
True. It's just so outside of the regular person's purview. You know what I mean? Like, if I was a woman and I found out some dude sodomized me, I'd probably be sure that I'm like, you better remember my name, fucker, because that's a wild thing. But your industry is different.
I've had kids come up to me in the mall and just be like, remember me? And they're with their girl. And I'm like, and they're like, you don't, and like, you see it in their girl's eyes that they had been just telling their girl that like, this is my homie. I like, and he's like, you don't remember me from downtown, the back of the store? In my head, I'm like, that was 6 years ago. You're telling me I haven't seen you in 6 years, and you think I remember your name? I was on Xanax, buddy. That's like, come on, man. Give me a break. Give me a reminder.
Since you brought up Xanax, actually, this is a good segue, and I'm probably gonna let you
into taking a Xanax.
No. What do you think happens to all like those dopey lean rappers like Lil Xan now that they are no longer relevant?
I mean, think about the career of a rapper. You basically like, you come out, you have this big explosion of interest where everybody wants to look at you and talk about you, and you're very much like this little freak show. And there's a lot of different levels to it where like some people just seem like regular guys, and they're kind of like, it's easier for people to like understand that their value is in the music versus like a lot of the SoundCloud rappers, the value is more in the meme. Right. And it's like, as a rapper, it's your job to like capitalize on that moment and then also try to like build something long term that you can monetize, right? And when you look at somebody like Lil Xan, he's definitely an example of somebody who basically just torched his, ability to really do his thing during that time period by not taking the opportunity serious. But then also it's like, what can you do with your fame in the long run? Because it's like, there's a lot of different ways to make money off rap and everything. And with Lil Xan, it's like, I think he's a charming enough guy that I think if he got sober, he could be successful doing any number of things. I think he could be a YouTuber or a streamer. I think he could probably make a decent run at being popular musically again if he were to really take that serious. I think that, it's just like a lot of things that I could kind of imagine somebody like him doing because he's famous as fuck. He is likable when he's in a relatively sober state. But is he going to take his life seriously enough to even pursue any of these like hypothetical opportunities? I mean, he hasn't really shown that to me for sure. And like people like Lil Pump, like he recently did an interview, and he hates me now. He's mad at me or whatever because I guess I said something on the podcast that made it sound like I thought he fell off or whatever. Which sorry, it's hard not to acknowledge reality sometimes. But and he basically like went and did an interview with Bootleg Kev the other day, and it just doesn't really seem like he's even accepted that his career has had like a downturn. And it seems like he kind of, there's no sign that he's like going to change anything. Because I think musically, all these guys, Lil Pump, Lil Xan, whatever, if they really were to put their fucking nose to the grindstone and make music that was interesting to people, I think that they could have success. Yeah. They just have to actually really take that serious. And you can't just keep making the same shit.
No. And then, oftentimes people come out with their first stuff and then it's their best stuff. And then afterwards they go through that sophomore slump that everyone talks about. But it's because there's an evolution that needs to happen. You know what I mean? A kid dancing at 13 is absolutely adorable, or 10, whatever. Then that same kid trying to do the same dances at 18, 19 doesn't elicit the same reaction. All of a sudden you lose that cute factor, that kind of initial factor. Yeah. People expect evolution. They expect some measure of change or some kind of growth, or you need to show some depth. Can't listen to you make the same fucking record for 30 years, So,
and people want to see growth. And it's like, even, you'll forever click on a girl's TikTok and she'll have 2 million followers, and like, she'll have a couple videos, a couple million views, and then she'll have like, every other current video is like 5,000 views, 10,000 views, because it's like, if it doesn't matter how pretty you are, if you just keep churning out the same fucking totally soulless content, then people are going to lose interest and stop watching. Same thing with YouTubers, same thing with all these rappers. And it's like, they have the fame part down. It's just, it's kind of depressing that now it's all about the music. Yeah. All about the music. You should, if I was any of those guys, I would like live in the studio. I would make myself a student of music. I would listen to music from the 70s and 80s and try different shit. Like, you just have to do, like, the only thing that's gonna bring Lil Xan back is if Lil Xan makes a fucking album or a song that changes shit and that is different.
I highly doubt they were working that hard before they got the music. No. So I doubt they're gonna work all of a sudden much harder after they get some comfort and they get some money.
Especially once they feel like no matter what they make, nobody's going to listen to it because the fan base just isn't there. And rap is just addicted to new shit. It's like they want to see new rappers.
It depends. I think some people elicit a loyal fan base and it becomes timeless, but those are few and far between.
You have to build a masterful career if you want to have the kind of fan base that'll sit on their hands for 5 years while you don't put an album out like Kendrick, That's just awesome. Like that. It's incredible, but it's like, it's the thing that like almost no rappers are able to do. And even rappers who are really popular, like somebody like Roddy Ricch goes away for like a year and then drops an album that people think is kind of mid, and it's like his stock plummets in regards to how people talk about him.
He hasn't earned it. He hasn't earned it.
He thought he was Kendrick, yeah.
You don't have to even be Kendrick. There's people on a smaller scale who retain their fan base even over the years. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm pretty confident that, like, take Immortal Technique, if he came out with a new album at some point, a lot of his old fan base will jump on all over that because he's he's earned that from them over
because
time.
he has a diehard fan base in the same way that a Danny Brown has a diehard fan base, in the same way that a Currency has that.
But they've
where
worked for it.
They've the highs of their career realistically have not been that high, but they've managed to like have this real ass fan base that'll support them long term. And that's the thing that a lot of these SoundCloud rappers 100% did not do, is that they just lost the connection with their community, which understandably, because a lot of those people just straight up move on. You know, like their favorite rapper when they were 14 is just not their favorite rapper 4 years later. Whereas your favorite rapper when you're 20 might actually be one of your favorite rappers when you're 30. Like when you're 18, 19, 20, that era of your fandom tends to be the part that gets crystallized long term, you know?
Have you ever interviewed somebody who made it big and then lost kind of everything afterwards and now is like working a regular life?
All the time, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
You've interviewed that person?
I mean, it's like a different version of it, but like Rich Homie Quan, I interviewed like 2 days ago, and he, you know, was in this group with Young Thug, was like signed to his label, was like had huge songs, and then him and Young Thug basically fall out, no communication. They don't fuck with each other at all anymore. And then around the same time, his career got kind of stalled out because he was in this bad label deal. He's trying to get out of the label deal, so he can't drop music for like 2-3 years. Yeah. And it's like, he was telling me the other day, it was pretty sad. He's like talking about how his 14-year-old son said to him, "Damn, Dad, like they were saying that you used to be the man." Like
that sounds like a rap lyric.
I know, but it's like,
used to be the man,
but I could imagine. Yeah, he was the man. And I don't know. That was like, and you know, he's still. It sounds like his money situation is still pretty good. Like he's not really hurting in that regard because he's had
That's so sad, bro.
Yeah, but he doesn't have like the fame or the like, you know, level of that he wanted to be at, and you know, but now he's independent and it's about the music. Can he make a fucking hit song that'll change shit for him? Like I listened to his new album. It's dope as fuck.
Think about how sad that is. He can provide a good life to his family and his son's like, you still fell off. That's a wild thing to hear. That's a blow and a half.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you first start just because you want to get out of the hood. Then you get out of the hood. Maybe you can't do the mansion and everything, but you get out.
Right.
And to a lot of people, you're still a failure. That's sad.
That's rap.
That's sad. Because at the end of the day, it's like, bro, your schooling's taken care of. We got some money put away. This house is owned. So, like, when I die, you going to own this building. You know what I'm saying? That's a beautiful thing. For most people, that's a beautiful thing. But then at the same time, some folks will still look at him like, that's a failure. And I'm like, bro, he can provide for his people. And he's, like, healthy and he's doing good. Like, that's a win.
But, you know? Rich, people perceive you in how you left the game, too. Did you do it on your own terms? Because with Rich Homie Quan, to his credit, he's super honest about the fact that he ended up falling off because of a bunch of shit that he didn't like. He didn't like the fact that the label shit went down like that, and he didn't like the fallout with Thug. Whereas when I was just talking about Lil Pump doing that interview, there's no like sense that he's being real with himself about where his career is at, which people really fucking hate, you know, is that like they feel like you're bullshitting yourself and them. But with Rich Homie Quan, it makes me want to see him win because he's just real about it. He's real about the fact that his career didn't necessarily go the way that he wanted it at a certain point. But I don't know. It's like, you know, it's like that with YouTube too. It's like, you know, we could make $10 million off YouTube and then decide to just say, hey, fuck this, man. I ain't doing this shit anymore. I'm going to go live in the woods with my family and just chill. Yeah. And I feel like everybody would respect that. And then if you pop back up 10 years later on YouTube, they'd all be like, dude, ABBA's sick. I remember ABBA, dude. Yeah. But if like you do it on your own terms, then it's going to garner a lot more respect.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely get that. I mean, even if you were to get deplatformed right now, you know, you can't do anything and you got your money station, you know.
I'm going to Rumble.
You go to Rumble, but let's say hypothetically you stopped.
Right.
I don't know. I think just the idea that people say you fell off or you couldn't do stuff anymore, and that's it. It's a wrap for you. It's like, I mean, he's good. You know, I mean, he's got his business with his wife. You know, I mean, the family, the kids are taken care of. The home is, the business is. Like, I mean, I don't know. I just think the metrics by which people decide whether someone's a success or not is interesting. I think I understand it on the artistic side. I just think as the individual or the person involved, I think it's a little bit unfair. Because think about where they started and where they ended.
Exactly, yeah.
Where they ended is still above 90% of the population.
But he stood next to Young Thug on all those songs, so then that people are going to compare him to Young Thug.
Wait, where's Young Thug?
Exactly.
Ain't he in jail facing RICO charges for like 20 plus years or something crazy?
And in light of that, I think a lot of people seem willing to like reconsider Rich Homie Quan because they're like, oh shit, like that is kind of fucked up that we stopped fucking with this dude just because we like this other rapper that he used to do music with and we knew that they didn't like each other. Like that's stupid as fuck. Like why the fuck are we concerned with something like that? But I think about that all the time now, dude, where like being successful used to always be like the only metric that I judge myself by. And now when I look at my life, I'm like, oh, I could fall off 100% as long as I got enough to take care of my kid and my girl and be able to have a good life. That's all I need. You know, there's everything else beyond that is just fucking cheese on the sandwich, you know?
As you spend less time online, you realize most of this shit don't matter, nor is it like real in a way. Because like these are things we post online and we leave a thought there and the person consumes it, so then it becomes real. But generally, they just get flushed down to the annals of the internet. Nobody really remembers. Right? Unless you're really connected. At the end of the day, it's just one of those things where the real metrics of whether you made it or not Facebook or YouTube comments are going to be the real life implications and how they translate.
Because you could be the biggest fucking YouTuber in the world. You could be the biggest rapper in the world. Realistically, I mean, Young Dolph was huge. How much do we hear people talk about Young Dolph? It's only a few months ago or 6 months ago. I don't know. And I'm a massive fan. I love Young Dolph. It's not disrespectful in any way, but I'm just saying you could be huge. And it's like people move on pretty fucking quickly. And like your name might still get mentioned and shit, but ultimately this fame shit, this entertainment shit, all this shit is like it's dope while you're here. But like, you know, sometimes I'll think to myself, like, what would my kid think if she heard this podcast 20 years from now? And then I'm like, the likelihood of my kid ever hearing this podcast would be like the likelihood of me hearing my dad's college radio broadcast.
Right, because it's such a sea of content.
Who the fuck cares about something that happened 20 years ago? Even if it's your dad.
I think your kid would care. The truth is that most other people would care, which is why their opinions don't matter nearly as much. The truth is, when you pay as the people are going to remember your accolades, or people are going to talk about it, people are like, you know, my dad are going to be the people who know you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be the people who actually know you, right? The people who follow YouTube, they're attached, we're part of their development in life. They say, thank you, help me, all this stuff. And, you know, that's beautiful.
To have a million...
At some point, we're going to be gone, and they're going to move on, and they're probably rarely going to think about it. You know Hot Damn I Rock? Hot Damn I Rock is a YouTuber.
No.
Okay, I wasn't just saying a sentence.
I thought you were saying, like, do you know how my dad rocks? I thought you were saying, I was like, what the fuck?
I used to watch this guy a decade ago, 2012. He used to do different times, and he just disappeared for some time. Apparently had some stuff going on health-wise, and he came back recently, made a few videos talking about how much he's changed as a person. And for me, it was like a nostalgia train. But I think about it, for 9 years, I didn't even think about him once. Right. His family was dealing with him. The people close with him were dealing with him. The rest of us had completely moved on from it. And so that's when you realize like all this stuff online is cool. It's cool for the moment, but it is, as we have to remember, for the moment.
To have 1 million subscribers is like incredible.
Sure.
They're all moving on. Yeah. They're all getting over it. There's plenty of other YouTubers for them to watch. Absolutely. And now like even the biggest ones, you know, if PewDiePie died tomorrow, yeah, it's going to be a big fucking deal. It's like we're going to hear a lot about it. We're going to read a lot of articles about... Was PewDiePie good for society? Where will PewDiePie's fans go now? Whatever. But it's like they're moving on. They're gonna get over it. They're gonna buy some T-shirts.
Max, you remember when MJ died?
Yeah,
that was something. When Prince died, that was something. Yeah. But they came from an era of being like larger than life figures. Right. I don't think you can say the same for pretty much anybody today. Right. Kobe was probably one of the biggest ones in the world, and when that was a big thing, you know, for a week and a half. And then, you know, people are like, all right, well, it's time to keep it pushing. You know what I'm saying? Or I'm pretty sure even if LeBron passed, you know, God forbid, but, you know, if it happened.
But if you die, it's the biggest deal in your kid's life until they die.
Absolutely. So that's why I say that's where things matter. That's where things matter at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Well, I can't think anywhere better to end it than that.
Yes, death.
Why do I have the most wholesome chats with you, dude? Even when I try to make it clickbaity, it just kind of
goes back to somewhere
holistic, you know.
Not all my conversations like that. I be getting stupid all the time. So,
but when we come together, it's like we got to talk about like quality of life, you know, good important things. We didn't even mention Fresh and Fit.
True, we did.
It's crazy. It's like all we talked about last time.
I think you can put it in the title now.
Now, yeah.
Now you can put it in the title. Yeah, no. I mean, hey, man. They reached 1 million subscribers. Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, we're at Oh, they did.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, congrats to them, man. That's dope. Appreciate you, man. Abba,
Yes, sir.
my guy.
Pleasure.
Subscribe to his channel, Abba and Preach, if you somehow made it this far without figuring that out. No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. Check us out on YouTube, TikTok, Patreon, Instagram, etc. Like, comment, and subscribe. NoJumper.com if you want to support. Appreciate you, man.